Hey, everybody, and welcome to Adapter Parish, episode 124, Eleanor H. Porter's Pollyanna. Now, I know it's sad that the episode isn't going to start for another minute, but just think of how glad you can be to know that I'm going to tell you all about our next episode. That's a joke about this episode. Way back in episode 34, we looked at William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and it's definitely time for us to revisit the Bard. We realized that we needed to make up for lost time, so we're going straight to the big one, Hamlet. In our next episode, we'll be covering Shakespeare's original play and screen adaptations released from 1948 all the way to 2009. It's going to be a lot. That'll be out in 1 month on Tuesday, April 4th. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections about today's episode or any others that you'd like to hear on the show, remember to email adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, we'd love it if you would share that with the world by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/adaptcast. We've got a patron-only community and our monthly bonus show, Adapter Parish Plus, with episodes releasing between episodes of this show. We hope you check it out. Show notes from this and all other episodes can be found at adapterparishcast.com. One final note, we've created a storefront on bookshop.org. You can go to bookshop.org/shop/adaptcast to see a collection of every book we've covered on the show. Any purchase you make not only supports this show, but also a local bookstore of your choice. Walk, don't run. It looks pretty cool. And with that, on with the show, Adapter Parish, episode 124, Pollyanna. Hello and welcome to Adapter Parish, a podcast about adaptation. I'm Jeremy Latour.
I'm Ari Lipshaw. We are hyped. We are pumped. We are doing Pollyanna.
We're getting over some stuff.
Yeah, we're getting through some stuff.
Do you want to do you want to do? I know you probably want to say something because you're very self-conscious.
Yes.
And there's nothing that could possibly help more than have your co-host go, "You're being very self-conscious right now."
I've been sick. I've been ill. I'm recovering currently from a sickness that has made me have a stuffy nose.
Yeah.
So
let me just ask you this.
Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being no different whatsoever, 10 being, oh my God, who is this person? How different do you think you sound in this recording?
I just think I sound a little scratchy.
Okay.
But I think the biggest impact that I just discovered just now, just this minute when we turn the microphones on, is I can't hear myself super well. Or at least I sound weird to my ears because my ears are stuffed up. And I've been having to ask you all weekend if the TV was at a reasonable volume because I feel like I was like turning it up and turning it down and it wasn't making any difference. I've been a little bit, I got a sickness. I got a cold. Very classic cold. I feel like with all like the weird viruses going around, like never mind COVID, but like just everyone I know has had just like, who with kids in daycare has just had like a series of successively weirder viruses. And just everyone's telling me like, yeah, I got a fever every night at 5:07 and it lasted until 9:23 and then it went away. And then I blew my nose 3 times. Like these just very weird.
Only pooped myself once.
Yeah, like just these very, you're closer than you know. These just very weird specific symptoms. And this has just seemed like a classic cold, a very, very classic old-fashioned. One evening I said to you, our kids had a runny nose. We kept them home from school for one day. I said to you, my throat's a little scratchy. Next morning I woke up, I got this cold. Next morning, took a sick day. Next day, felt a little better. Next day, woke up, said, hey, you know what? I think I can breathe through my nose again. Like a classic sort of 1 weeker of a cold, which, it's nostalgic if nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, it's appropriate given what we're doing.
Yeah.
Even though in those days it would have killed someone.
Right. Surely.
So Pollyanna's dad had
A cold.
Did you know that?
Died of a cold.
Classic cold.
Just died.
That's all it was.
Yeah, took cold and died. That's what people did.
Yeah. One of his symptoms was stuffiness. The other
Yeah.
symptom was being alive 100 years ago.
Right.
And
his third symptom was death.
You put those two things together and you get symptom number 3.
Yeah, blood on the handkerchief.
Yeah.
Never a good sign.
It's no good. Well, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Thank you.
And
I'm still not 100%.
But I'm excited that we're going to be talking about Pollyanna.
I haven't been counting, but I think this is number 5 in the plucky orphan goes to live with a grumpy person.
Yeah.
series. And there's still more. There's more in this genre.
Mm-hmm.
I really, this is something I really want to explore. This is something I want to cover.
I mean, this is really doing multiple things that we keep coming back to, because one of them is the plucky orphan, but the other one is the ableism.
Yeah.
Kind of the. I was trying to come up with like a funnier way to say it, but there like is no funny way to say it,
Yeah,
because
they
it's just straight up ableism.
Yeah, the take up thy bed and walk situation.
Yeah.
Which is the name of a book that I like
Mm-hmm.
about this topic.
Can you what are some of the, just to catch anyone up who hasn't heard already, like what are some of the other ones we've covered where that has been a thing?
The ableism or the plucky orphan? Or really both.
Both.
Okay, so plucky orphan, we've had Anne of Green Gables.
Okay.
We've done Heidi.
Yeah.
We've done
Little Princess.
We've done Secret Garden.
Yeah.
And now here we are in Pollyanna. And weirdly enough, Secret Garden and Heidi both have this sort of ableism, like,
yeah.
Like I could not walk and now I can. Like really, it's the same. Interestingly,
Although, I mean, I'm just gonna remind if anyone did hear our Heidi episodes and our Secret Garden episode, one of the comparisons that I made is that like in Heidi, the ableism is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because this kid is sick. This
Yeah.
kid is very sick, and the bracing mountain air is all that she needs, and now she can walk again. And in Secret Garden, like the kid is a victim of Munchausen by proxy.
right?
Like he's a victim of abuse.
But actually, physically, there's nothing stopping him from walking.
Yeah, like it's explained, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like everyone is saying that he has something. Like
Right.
he is there's a definite problem. So I remember when we did Secret Garden that I remember reacting to a lot of the ableism labels that were thrown at that one. And I'm like, it's not like it's not there, but boy, like something like Heidi deserves it even more.
Yeah.
I would say Pollyanna is another one of those ones that deserves it quite a bit.
There's a lot of invalids in Pollyanna, like a lot of invalidism.
Yeah.
Yes. But we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we launch into a plot summary?
No, I'm excited. I'm ready. Let's do this. This
Jeremy,
is all new to me.
Jeremy just led us through some some calisthenics, some pump up exercises. It was very funny, and I want to do that now before every recording session because if nothing else, it made me laugh.
There was some squatting.
There's some clapping.
Yep.
It was great.
Mhm.
I wish we had a little video of us doing.
I'm so glad there isn't one.
Yeah.
I don't even know why you're telling everyone about it. I thought that could be our special little thing.
It was pretty funny. It just tickled me. So listen, ordinarily I would say this is the type of book where I would do the plot summary,
Mhm.
e.g. a book that I have read 8 million times before and was a staple of my childhood and that I know forwards and backwards and like the back of my hand. I got a little bit of a scratchy throat
Mhm.
and I just kind of want to save my voice and I was wondering if you would be so kind.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah, as to launch into that. And
I would love to get a ton of things wrong
Yeah.
and be corrected.
no, that'll be great.
I love being put on the spot. That's great.
I think that your time management skills will really come in handy because we do this is an episode about a children's book. So as far as time goes, I think making it a tight episode would be good.
I mean, a tight episode, but we got a book. We got 6 adaptations to talk
That's
about.
why I'm saying just go do the plot
Well,
summary.
hang on. Hey, everybody. We're doing Pollyanna. Pollyanna was published in 1913. It was written by Eleanor H. Porter. How about we do this back of the book,
Okay.
and then we could go ahead and try to go through a plot synopsis on this one.
That sounds great.
Soon after the 11-year-old Pollyanna Whittier is left an orphan, she is sent to live with her rich Aunt Polly in Beldingsville, Vermont. Pollyanna's aunt is a strict and dutiful woman she doesn't even know. Aunt Polly puts Pollyanna in a tiny attic room where she hopes Pollyanna will be out of the way. But Pollyanna is the kind of girl who can always find something to be happy about, no matter how sad life may seem at the time. She calls it, quote, playing the glad game. Soon, everyone around this remarkable girl, from John Pendleton, a rich but lonely bachelor, to Aunt Polly herself, falls under her special spell, until one day something so terrible happens that even Pollyanna doesn't know how to feel glad anymore. I'd say it's a pretty good back of the book.
It's not bad.
So our story begins, as the synopsis says, we enter, what is it, in media res.
Mhm.
The story is happening.
Yeah.
Like, Pollyanna she is an orphan.
Yes.
She has been orphaned.
Yes.
And we don't even meet her at the beginning of it. We meet Aunt Polly at the beginning of it. So, but by all accounts, Aunt Polly seems to be the main character of this book. We meet Aunt Polly, and she is talking to her servant. What's Nancy's job?
She's a servant girl.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old would you say Nancy is?
Oh, like 19.
Right. And Aunt Polly is like, she's old.
Oh, she's
super old.
40 if she's a dick.
Literally 40. This year I'm turning 40. This book did this a couple of times to me, and
Yeah.
I'll get to the second one here in a little bit.
I just want to be clear. You took offense, and I pointed out to you that in the book, someone specifically says she's not old. She just acts like she's old.
Yeah. I didn't take offense.
Yeah.
I just was shocked.
Like the author was not saying that 40 is old. The author specifically has a character say she's not old. You think she's old, but she's not.
So anyway, she's got this kid who's coming to live with her because her sister, who died a long time ago, she ran off and married this pastor.
Yeah.
And they had a kid, and her sister died. Now, what are the names? So her name is Polly.
Her name is Polly. The other sister, there were 3 sisters.
Yep.
One was Polly, one was Anna, and Pollyanna's mother's name was Jenny.
Mhm.
And so Jenny named her last baby. So Jenny apparently had a bunch of babies that died. The
Mhm.
last one lived, and she named her Pollyanna after her 2 sisters.
Right. So she dies. Then later, Pollyanna's dad dies.
This is all before the book even begins.
Yeah. So Pollyanna is sent to live with her only living relative, Aunt Polly.
Yeah.
And Aunt Polly, she's doing this because she cares deeply about children and has a large heart. That's not really it. She hates everyone, but has a really strong feeling about duty.
She feels strongly about duty.
Yeah. And she is kind of a jerk, and nobody likes her. And people wonder why she is such a sourpuss. But there we go.
Grinch-like, her heart is perhaps several sizes too small.
I mean, 3 at least.
Yes.
So Pollyanna arrives. And Pollyanna is the most annoying kid in the world. to Aunt Polly.
Yes.
Like, Aunt Polly finds her very annoying.
But you know who likes her a lot?
Who likes her a lot?
Everybody else.
Everyone.
Everyone loves her, immediately loves her.
Yeah.
And she's not the thing I like about Pollyanna,
Yep.
I will say,
Mhm.
and I think we've sort of mentioned this before, and it was part of the reason I wanted to do Pollyanna on the show.
I mean, if you're going to have a TED Talk, this is the moment that you're stepping on stage to make your grand proclamation about Pollyanna.
Yeah. So the word Pollyanna has sort of entered the vocabulary as an idiom, and has, I think, often been taken to mean something a little bit more simplistic than what this character is, and sort of blindly optimistic, and like saccharine sweet are 2 implications, I guess, connotations
Yeah.
of the word Pollyanna as I think it's used colloquially. Does that track with your sort of feeling?
That tracks for me.
Yeah. But I don't know if you would agree. I don't know that either of those 2 things apply to this kid,
I don't think so.
because she's not super sweet. I mean, she's sweet. She's fun. She's funny. She's kind
definitely an Anne Shirley type
Yeah,
character. She's super interested in people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's wise beyond her years. She's clearly a kid that spent all of her time with adults, as she talks about. She's never had any children to play with, and I think that makes a kid precocious.
Mhm.
And she essentially has been taught to look on the bright side by her father, but acknowledges that the whole point of this is that it didn't come naturally to her. She had to learn. It was a skill. She had to learn. You know, sometimes it's harder. She's not like blindly optimistic. She's like, oh, yeah, that is bad. That's terrible. Let's find something in it to be glad about. It's not just well, that bad thing is actually a good thing. It's like let's find one thing that we can be happy about.
Yeah, like there's so many moments within the book where she's presented with a situation where her immediate reaction is like, fuck, that's hard.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
That's really tough. I'm going to need to think on that one for a little bit. I'm going to need to go home, and when I come back to you tomorrow, I'm sure I will have thought of something.
Yeah.
Like that's not the character that I feel like I always was given to understand Pollyanna was. That's not that person.
Yeah. May I explain? I know you said you were going to do the plot summary. May I explain the
I
genesis?
mean, you said I was going to do the plot
I
synopsis.
did, but then I got excited. May I explain the genesis of the Glad game, because it is a very important point in the plot of the book.
Absolutely.
Going forward. So, here's something that we learn. Pollyanna shows up, and she's excited, and she's always talking about being glad. Well, I can be glad about this. I can be glad about that. Aren't you glad about this? Aren't you glad about that? And she immediately makes friends with all of the servants, with Nancy, who's the hired girl, and Tim, who's the hired boy, and old Tom, who's Tim's father, and is
dead Tom.
dead Tom, real old Tom, and is the gardener. Nancy asks her at one point, she's like, something bad has happened, like Aunt Polly said something mean, or, she'd put her in a room that sucks. Like the room they put her in is not nice, and it's hot, and she's not allowed to open the windows, and it's like objectively terrible. And
like flies get inside when
flies
she
get
opens the window,
inside,
and
and she
Aunt
gets in
Polly's just
trouble.
like, flies,
Yeah.
no, fuck this.
So she explains to Nancy, and Nancy says, what are you so glad of? Why are you always talking about being glad all the time? Like, there's nothing really to be glad about. And she explains to Nancy the genesis of the Glad game.
Oh,
and,
dear me. Yes, there is something to be glad about.
And goes on for the course of the entire book to explain the Glad game to every single person as we see in the town. Like literally every person in the town is playing the Glad game. So
Are you going to talk about how ableism is built into the genesis of the Glad game itself?
No, I think I'm just going to say what it is, and then we can go into the ableism. I'll let you talk about the ableism later.
Okay.
That was not part of my my summary here.
It's sprinkled throughout the infrastructure of the book.
Okay.
The dramatic infrastructure.
There is going to be some ableism in what I'm about to say. I pray that you'll forgive me. It is literally just explaining what happens in the book. One day, so she and her father were very poor because he's a poor minister, and basically everything they get, clothes, books, or whatever it may be, all comes from these like missionary barrels. And it sounds like they just kind of show up and they just have stuff in them, and you get what you get. And she had really wanted a doll. They couldn't afford a doll, so they were just like sort of hoping against hope that a doll would show up in one of these barrels. And her father had even written to say, like, if there's a doll, could you send it? And they didn't send a doll, but instead of a doll, they sent a pair of child's crutches, which obviously is not a good substitute for a doll. Not the same thing.
They're not equivalent.
Not equivalent, even a little. And of course, Pollyanna, being a little child who wanted a doll and got crutches, which fucking sucks, was very upset. And her father said, now, let's look on the bright side. In anything that happens, let's play a game, and the game is find something to be glad about in whatever happens to you. And she says, I don't. There's nothing to be glad about. And Nancy kind of says to her the same thing. I can't think of what that would be. And she says, oh, no, my father had to explain it to me. I didn't get it at first either. But the thing to be glad about is that I don't need them, which is ableism. I know. Well, let's just skip past it. We'll come back to it.
Intense ableism.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. And so ever since then, she'd always played the Glad game with her father for years and years. And now that, he's gone, it's harder for her to play, she says, but she's still going to keep trying to do it because she knows that's what her father would have wanted. Now, importantly, the minute she showed up in town and started to talk about her father to Aunt Polly essentially has ordered her, do not mention your father in front of me, because Aunt Polly just hated her father because she took her sister away and just doesn't want to talk about it.
Also, you keep saying this word glad.
Yeah.
If I hear it one more goddamn time, Pollyanna, you're out on your ass.
Yeah, so she's not allowed to say glad, and she's
Speak
not
when spoken to.
Yeah. She's not allowed to say glad, and she's not allowed to talk about her father. So given that the game is called the Glad game and the whole genesis of the Glad game came from her father, she never explains to Aunt Polly what the game is. So Aunt Polly goes through 99% of the book in a total mystery, and the rest, as Pollyanna gets the rest of the town to play the game. Okay, my throat is starting to get a little scratchy, so I'm going to let you keep going.
I'll go until the spirit moves you again. So she meets a whole bunch of people in the town. The order of things that happen I don't think are super important, but here are some of the people that she meets. She meets Mr. Pendleton, who's this crotchety old guy. This is like, honestly, I think this might be my favorite part of the book, just the description of how she like becomes friends with him, because their entire relationship is basically she's walking down the road and he walks past her and she goes, good morning, and he goes, fuck you. And then the next day she goes, good morning, and he goes, I said fuck you. And keeps walking, and she keeps like trying to talk to him and trying to talk to him, and finally she just like gets in a little bit, and he finally learns that he needs to acknowledge her and he needs to talk to her, and then so that she'll leave him alone, and then he falls and breaks his leg and she rescues him, and then they become friends.
Yep. And
I love it that like the trajectory of their relationship is fantastic. I don't have like a favorite character in the book, but they have my favorite relationship in the book. But I like Mr. Pendleton, and we'll come back to Mr. Pendleton. He's also rich, which is important. She also meets Dr. Chilton, who is
very important character.
He's a doctor in the town, and he's the person who comes and helps Mr. Pendleton with his broken leg that Pollyanna kind of rescued him from. And Pollyanna, she loves Dr. Chilton.
Oh, he's great.
Loves him so much. So much. He's so great. She meets Jimmy Bean, who's a little orphan from the town. Because they have an orphanage, and he says, hello, little girl. My name is Jimmy Bean. I am a proud kid, and I have decided I'm going to leave the orphanage. And I want to say, like, let's go back for a second, because one of the things that happens over the course of the book that is a delightful thing to watch, because Aunt Polly, I had no experience with it, and I'd never seen any of I don't even think I'd ever seen the Disney movie all the way through. I'd seen like bits and pieces of it. I kind of read Aunt Polly as potentially like what's the character from Little Princess?
Miss Minchin?
Miss Minchin. just an unredeemable antagonist.
Yeah.
And she isn't that
No,
at
she's not
all.
that.
Like, she's incredibly redeemable. Like, she's not an antagonist at all.
Yeah.
Like, maybe a tiny bit, but if she is an antagonist, she's not a very effective antagonist.
She just needs to have her heart warmed.
Right, yeah. Expanded.
Yeah. One
So,
might say.
like, there's a thing throughout the book that I love, the description of this thing that where Aunt Polly just constantly, like, the way Porter describes it is very visual. Like, the way Polly's hand always goes to her throat to comfort herself because she feels that her control is slipping away.
She feels like she's lost control of her life.
Yes, which is something, I mean, as the parent of a 3-year-old, especially
we related to
relate to that on an intense level.
immensely.
So that's the thing that happens throughout. So, like, there are these descriptions of Pollyanna bringing home, like, a stray cat and a stray dog and all these things. And Aunt Polly every single time is like, no, absolutely not. And but her wishes don't seem to mean anything.
Yeah.
Because Pollyanna is that kind of kid. That all being said, Pollyanna decides, Jimmy Bean, oh, hey, guess what? My Aunt Polly will adopt you because she's great. And she took me in, and I love Aunt Polly. I love her so much. She's not nice to me, and, like, she doesn't let me talk about my dad or the Glad game, which does make me sad, but I love her so much. She's a great person, and she will take you in, Jimmy Bean. She brings Jimmy Bean back to her house, and Aunt Polly says, what the fuck are you talking about? No way. And and she's like this little beggar kid, and Jimmy Bean is like, excuse me, madam. I have pride. The only reason I came here is because this little girl told me that you would take me in and that you were kind. Seeing that is not the case, good day, madam.
It's all kind of written in dialect, which we were sort of trying to parse out if that's how people from Vermont are supposed to have spoken, and we couldn't quite crack it.
I feel like we've read a number of books that do a beautiful job of writing dialect.
Yeah.
This does not feel like one of those to me.
I mean, given that we live in a state that, well, Massachusetts borders Vermont.
Yeah.
Let me try that again. Given that we live in a state that does in fact border the state in which this takes place, like
we are in New England.
I'm reasonably familiar with the way people in New England speak, and this dialect is unrecognizable. Can I just say something really quickly before you move on from Jimmy Bean about the Ladies' Aid, because it is important.
Yeah.
So one of the things we learn about Pollyanna and the way that she grew up, because her mother died, of course, when she was very, very small, is that she was raised by her father, who was the minister of the church, plus the Ladies' Aid, who is like the community of women of the church. She has lots of fun stories about, like, all of her different Ladies' Aid friends, and her favorite was Mrs. White, but she likes all of them, and she just has all these fun stories about, like, all the things that all these different ladies used to do, and the conversations they would have, and the fights that they would have amongst themselves, and what they would try to teach her, and what they would talk about.
She throws a lot of shade at the Ladies' Aid as well.
She does, but she also has this
like, every time anyone does anything for her or gives her anything, she's like, this is so much better than anything I got from the Ladies' Aid. I did love all of them.
Yeah, she loved them.
But they were terrible, and everything they gave me was shit.
And so one of the things she has come to understand is that, like, a Ladies' Aid is a group of ladies that, like, try to help people. So, like, when Jimmy Bean is rejected, she's like, oh, I'll go to the Ladies' Aid of this town and, like, see if they'll help. And she's confused by the fact that they're terrible. But one sort of insight that I just think I just now had, just like when you were talking, the way that Pollyanna was raised by all of, essentially in this sort of weirdly communal family situation, right? Because she says, I was raised by my father and the Ladies' Aid.
Yeah.
And she talks about, like, they all wanted to teach her to bake or cook, but they couldn't decide, and none of them made bread the same, so they couldn't teach her how to do bread, so they would, like, send her to different houses to, like, learn how to cook different things. And, like, the way that she understands a community as being comprised of people who have different strengths and different relationships with each other, but who are all sort of banding together around a common goal, and who don't have to be the same or think the same, but can still all be good people and still all trying to do the right thing and, like, essentially have similar goals. I think it's really wise for her age. And as she sort of enters into this community, that's clearly the assumption that she's coming in with, is that everyone is great. People are different. It's really interesting that people are different. I really want to find out about all the differences amongst people. But definitely what everybody wants is, like, to be a positive force for good in the community.
But also the thing she knows about people implicitly is that people need to play the glad game because it's not something that comes naturally to anybody.
Right. You have to be taught.
Like that, and that I think is really wise and insightful about
Yeah.
people. Like she doesn't meet a single person that's like, "Why are you such a sad sack?"
Yeah.
Like anyone she meets who's negative, she's like, "Oh, I know,
I can help.
I can help you.
Yeah.
I know why you are negative. You don't know how to play the game."
Right. She even like talks about like the ladies probably used to fight,
Mhm.
and clearly her father at one point told her like not to talk about the fights that they have.
Yeah.
And she like sometimes stops herself from saying like they would fight and says like, "Oh, when they didn't always agree." It's so cute. She's just so insightful about people and especially about grown-ups. She is
Mhm.
clearly a child. She's not just like a tiny adult. Like she is a child and she has a child's perceptions of things, but she's just like really wise and really observant in a really fun way, I think.
Yeah. But also naive when the story requires her to be naive.
Yes, yeah,
So
exactly.
like actually before I say that, let me just say really let's wrap this Jimmy Bean thing up really quickly. He just kind of becomes the town's orphan kid running around
Right.
because she goes to the Ladies' Aid locally and they have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they refuse to help him, and so gets discouraged and leaves and Jimmy Bean is like, "Well, I guess I'll just kind of hitch a ride on the wind."
Yeah.
So
And eventually, spoiler alert, he does get adopted by Mr. Pendleton.
Right. So the thing I was going to say really quickly is that one of the characters she meets where her naivete is kind of important to the plot is Mrs. Snow.
Love Mrs. Snow.
She meets Mrs. Snow. She is sent to Mrs. Snow. She volunteers to go to Mrs. Snow
Mhm.
because one of the things that Aunt Polly does is Aunt Polly and the rest of the community is they give Mrs. Snow things because Mrs. Snow is bedridden.
She's an invalid.
She's an invalid. What does she have?
Unclear.
Who knows?
A disease.
She has something. She could literally have like celiacs or something like that.
Wait,
like we don't
Maybe
know.
all these things they're sending her are making her worse.
Yeah, right. We have no idea. This was actually something that I was talking to you about a couple of weeks ago. I feel like everyone, whether they know it or not, probably not. I certainly don't know what my number is, but I think everyone has a year. And the year assigned to them is the year in which if they went back in time, they would know less than a doctor of the day. So, for example, if you or I got sent back 400 years ago,
Yeah.
we would know more than any doctor.
Yes.
Any doctor you could find 400 years ago, I feel confident in saying we could treat people better than that doctor could.
Honest to God, probably 100 years ago.
Well, no, but that's what I was going to say
Yeah.
is where's the line?
I think it's 100 years ago. I listened to a lot of Sawbones. I think it's 100 years ago.
But that's the thing. Everyone's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like a doctor from today, like that's going to be very different than us.
Sure.
You know? And think of healthy people who know nothing about healthcare and aren't even interested and have never had to go to a hospital.
That would be you, yeah.
Those people don't. I have had to deal with health things in the past.
You have to get your appendix out.
I did, and other things. Don't
Get
play-
other things out.
I feel like you're breaking HIPAA, and I don't appreciate that.
I'm not your medical provider.
Anyway, I think about it a lot, and I feel like this is the episode where I've decided to talk
I guess
about
this
it.
is what we're doing now.
But anyway, on to Mrs. Snow.
35 minutes into Pollyanna.
Doesn't matter. On to Mrs. Snow. One of the things, Aunt Polly always sends something to Mrs. Snow. And Nancy's talking to Pollyanna and says, like, yeah, we're going to send her calf's foot jelly, which is mentioned multiple times in the book. Sounds like the most fucking disgusting thing I've ever seen.
Oh, I looked up what it is.
Yeah?
It's foul.
Yeah, I'm sure it
It's
is.
disgusting.
I didn't need to look it up to know that.
It's basically exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah.
It's just savory jello.
That's awful.
It's awful. But it
Awful.
was thought to be very good for invalids, apparently.
Well, because people didn't know what the fuck they were talking about.
Sure.
But anyway, Pollyanna says, I want to bring Mrs. Snow her calf's foot jelly. And it says, yeah, well, you can bring it, but what she's going to want is chicken soup or lamb broth. Like she never wants the thing we bring her because she's a very negative person. She always wants something else. And this is where Pollyanna's naivete comes out because Pollyanna goes to visit and Mrs. Snow says, oh, I wish it had been lamb's broth, because of course she did. And Pollyanna goes, oh, I thought you would have wished that it was chicken soup. I thought when it's calf's foot jelly, you want it to be chicken soup, but when it's chicken soup, you want it to be lamb broth.
Right. Naivete and I think a certain literalism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But she's not doing it intentionally.
No. But
Like,
I'm saying that's part of her character. She
Right.
takes things very literally.
yeah. But the point I'm making is that this is not something she's doing to manipulate Mrs. Snow.
Sure.
She's just being a kid and she's being herself and she's saying like, I thought, blah, 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 blah. And Mrs. Snow is like, oh, the impertinence. I don't even remember if that's in
Who
the
you just
book,
talking to?
but it's in in multiple versions of the movie. But anyway, she ends up shocking Mrs. Snow out of her malaise and shows her like, oh, you're pretty. This is another thing that made me feel kind of attacked in the book, is that Mrs. Snow is also, like Aunt Polly, presented as old.
Yeah.
And if you've seen any version of it, Mrs. Snow is, like 50s at the earliest.
Yeah.
Right? But
50s,
also,
she's
like,
dead.
no matter what age she is, she's presented as more advanced than that because of her being an invalid.
Right.
For whatever reason
Sure,
she is.
Sure.
In the book, she's 40.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I
again,
know.
specifically 40.
Yeah.
Like, and I want to say, like, I felt seen. I didn't feel seen. I felt like I was being told on. I didn't appreciate it. But Mrs. Snow is great. And Pollyanna befriends her, and she, does her hair. Pollyanna loves doing hair. So, because she does Mrs. Snow's hair, and then she does Aunt Polly's hair.
She does Aunt Polly's hair, and Aunt Polly accidentally gets seen by Dr. Chilton.
Which is, like, horrifying
and she's
for
really
her.
embarrassed. And then we find out the reason, bum, bum, bum.
Well, so one of the things that Pollyanna discovers from Nancy is that Aunt Polly used to have a lover.
A sweetheart.
Nancy and Pollyanna, smart cookies that they are, figure out that it's Mr. Pendleton.
Yep.
Because he's alone and crotchety. And you know what? Honestly,
and they seem to hate each other.
Yeah,
so
they seem to hate each other.
It works.
Like, not knowing anything. Like, again, I want to be clear. I had never really seen any of the adaptations. I had never read the book. I was kind of right there with them. I was like, oh, this makes sense that Mr. Pendleton and Aunt Polly used to have a relationship, but now they don't talk to each other anymore. And I will give Eleanor Porter this. Like, this was, I thought, a really effective and fun subversion of expectations. Because it turns out, no, you dum-dums, that's not what it is at all. Mr. Pendleton, he was in love with Pollyanna's mom.
Oh.
And Dr. Chilton was Aunt Polly's lover.
That's right.
So when Aunt Polly is seen by Dr. Chilton, that is why she is so affected and so embarrassed.
Right.
And again, to be clear, she is seen being pretty.
Right. So Pollyanna has warmed the hearts of everyone in the town.
Yep.
She's even secretly warmed the heart of Aunt Polly, although she has not really admitted this. But one day, tragedy strikes.
Yeah.
Pollyanna, tragically, gets hit by a car.
It's very sad.
Just comes out of nowhere. And it turns out that she has this grievous injury, and she is paralyzed from the waist down and can't walk again. This kind of sets things all afluster. So first of all, obviously, because of their falling out, Dr. Chilton is not Aunt Polly's doctor. Her doctor is the other doctor in the town. And
the shitty doctor.
The shitty doctor. And he's like out of his depth. And so they're like trying to get a specialist to come and see her, but because he's like, I don't know. And Dr. Chilton's like, I think I know something about this because my friend, a doctor friend of mine worked on cases like these, but I need to be able to see her, but I can't go, and she won't have me.
Because of course in 1913 an author would say, oh, well, a confident doctor would be able to cure paralysis.
Right. But like the thing is, like, we have no idea what the problem is. It may well be something that we could cure today. Do you know what I mean? We don't know.
Yeah, but here's the deal. Do you know who else doesn't know?
Eleanor Porter.
Dr. Chilton.
Dr. Chilton, no idea.
He has no fucking clue what's going on. He's done no examination.
Right. But he thinks she can be cured. From what he's heard.
The only reason he's right is because Eleanor Porter wants him to be
which
right.
Obviously is nonsense. Because all he's heard is she can't walk. So like, how would he possibly know? Anyway, Pollyanna's very upset because she feels like she can't play the glad game anymore. Yeah. She can't think of anything to be happy about in the fact that she can't walk, which again is the ableism. Like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Like, that sucks.
But this is a perfect example of like the damage that ableism does.
Right.
Because she was taught to play the glad game in the context of how glad you should be that you don't need crutches.
Right.
Which is a super fucked up thing to teach a kid.
Right. It's not
like
good.
that literally is why ableism is a bad thing.
Right.
So good job, Pollyanna's dad.
Good job.
You have now prevented...
Because now she needs the crutches, so now she doesn't have anything to be glad about.
Right?
Right.
Because you taught her that was the thing she should be glad about.
And so people start coming to the house to talk to Aunt Polly about how great Pollyanna is and how sad they are that she can't play the game anymore. And after the 700th person comes and says, I'm so sorry to hear she can't play the game anymore, Aunt Polly says to Nancy, you have to tell me has everyone gone crazy? What is happening? And Nancy's like, yeah, I'm going to make you feel really bad in a
Yeah.
second. And I'm going to need you to sit down.
Does she intentionally do it, or does she just tell her and Aunt Polly makes the connection? Or does Nancy
No,
say...
Nancy says,
okay,
you told her she couldn't talk about her father, you absolute monster. And Aunt Polly feels very, 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 very bad.
she
should. She goes to Dr. Chilton and says, like, I've been so wrong about everything. Also, I love you. Let's get married. And he's like, that sounds perfect. And then she goes to Pollyanna and says, I have a couple of things to tell you. 1, I'm going to play the game. 2, Dr. Chilton's going to be your uncle. 3, you're going to New York. You're going to be able to walk again. And then we get this like final little epilogue chapter that, sure enough,
well, it's a letter that Pollyanna,
Right.
because everything else is done like third person,
Right.
But the final thing is Pollyanna writing a letter to Aunt Polly, right?
Yes.
Saying, hey, how fucking...
Let me bring you up to speed.
Let me bring you up to speed. It's so cool. As you know, I can walk again, which is great.
Yeah.
Because that's how these things work. It was so nice that you came to get married at my bedside to Dr. Chilton. It's like 2 pages.
Yeah.
And it's just this beautiful little thing to give us, the audience, the reassurance that every bad thing was reversed.
Yes.
Aunt Polly, no longer alone.
Mm-hmm.
Now with Dr. Chilton, who we like. Bad thing reversed. Pollyanna couldn't walk, now can walk.
Yeah.
Bad thing reversed. The problem is, and this gets back to the ableism, one of those is the kind of bad thing that a kid reading this book will go, man, I hope that I can be emotionally available to whoever my partner is going forward.
Yep.
And the other one is, oh, if I can't walk, I'm less of a person.
Yeah, it's not it's not a great moral.
It's a terrible moral.
And also like that she sort of became able to walk through the force of being a good person, which is also not how it works.
Yeah, it really isn't.
Your spinal cord doesn't care if you're a good person or not. If it makes you feel any better, there is a sequel to this book. I believe it's called Pollyanna Grows Up.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe at the outset of that book, she's now a teenager, but what happens is...
Does she get hit by another car?
No, but Dr. Chilton dies and they lose all their money.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Are you serious?
I think that's... To the best of my recollection, yes.
Oh my God.
I'm sorry.
I don't care that much.
Yeah, I didn't think you would.
Like, can I be clear? I liked this book. I liked
no,
it.
I know.
I didn't love this book.
Yeah,
I liked parts of it. I loved Nancy.
I don't
loved
think it was
old
written
Tom.
for a 40-year-old man to come to for the first time.
Well, but a lot of these I do like. Both of the
Frances Hodgson Burnett.
Yes, both. I can never say her name.
Yeah.
Like both of those, I really enjoyed.
Yes.
I really enjoyed Anne of Green
Objectively,
Gables.
those are better books. Like,
Yes.
just those are better, more literary classics. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this does bring something to the table because Pollyanna is, as you said before, like a more interesting character than I think she's ever given credit for.
Yeah.
And the Glad Game is actually an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And Aunt Polly is an interesting character who I do think there is the Aunt Polly Pendleton Dr. Chilton dynamic. There is a subversion there that I do appreciate. I think it's the good kind of subversion.
Yeah.
There are really good supporting characters in it. I love Nancy. I love old Tom. Mrs. Snow's great. Jimmy Bean's a lot of fun. It has a lot going for it. It is a good book, but it's not. It's not a great book.
It's not a great book.
It really isn't.
It's not a great work of literature.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
Can I say the thing that I'm sure many other people have said?
Sure.
How much better would this book have been if Pollyanna couldn't walk at the end of it and had to learn that you can play the Glad Game no matter what?
It would be a different book.
It doesn't make you less of a person if you can't walk.
I mean, it was 1913.
No, but I'm just saying that would have made it better.
How enlightened do you want to expect them to be?
No, but here we are on our podcast about adaptation saying if you're adapting it, you can make changes if you want to. It might piss some people off, but you are allowed to make changes. This isn't Shakespeare. You can do a version where Pollyanna can't walk at the end. Yeah. But spoiler alert, no one does that. No, Pollyanna always gets to walk at the end because that is apparently the thing that's super important in the book.
Well, that feels like a good transition into these adaptations.
I think so too. 7 years later, after this book was published, it was made into a movie.
Silent movie.
Such a hit that it was. Well, every movie was at the time. Directed by Paul Powell, written by Frances Marion, starring fucking superstar for the ages, Mary Pickford as Pollyanna Whittier.
A tiny adult.
Yeah, tiny adult playing 11-year-old Pollyanna. She was, what am I showing here? I'm trying to read this. She was 17 years old playing 11. No, something's weird. 27 years old.
27.
Playing 11. Like, we're not here to talk about Mary Pickford.
We're not here to judge.
There are so many people who have talked about Mary Pickford forever, ad nauseum.
This is like her third appeal. Was she in Evergreen Gables too? She wasn't, was she?
No, Anne Shirley was.
Right, but not right. That wasn't a silent version though.
No, it wasn't.
But she was a little princess.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and say second appearance. Definitely. I like Mary Pickford. She's great. She looks great. She's very pretty. She looks like a movie star.
It is weird seeing her stand next to actual children though, because she's so obviously a small adult.
It is very strange.
Yes.
It is weird to watch in a creepy way.
Yes.
Like, it's creepy. Like, you know what? No, hang on. I want to be a little less kind about it.
Okay.
I feel like I'm trying to be very kind about this.
Uh-huh.
It is creepy. I don't like it.
Okay.
I don't like watching Mary Pickford play
sort of
a child.
June Allison thing.
Yeah, it's not as creepy as that is,
was
but
very
like
creepy.
it's pretty creepy.
Yeah.
Like at least Mary Pickford doesn't have like crow's feet.
Yeah.
Whereas June Allison has like active crow's feet
All right,
playing a tiny child.
Don't talk about June Allison's crow's feet. I always think that's not very nice.
Why? Okay, I want to be clear. June Allison, beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
the crow's feet have nothing to do with whether she's attractive. Crow's feet happen to everybody. What I have a problem with are the creepy producers who are
Okay.
saying we need to infantilize her
Okay.
and make people see her as a child when she is a beautiful grown-ass woman.
Yes.
That's my problem with it.
That's fair.
Okay, so this movie literally came out more than 100 years ago.
It's wild. It is wild. I really have a hard time wrapping my head around this
Like,
fact.
I feel like I don't have a lot to say about this
Well,
one.
Here's the deal.
Yeah.
We're recording this. We, in all good faith, started watching these real early because we were trying to get ahead. Some stuff came up. We're still kind of recording at the last minute like we do sometimes. So at this point, having watched these, it's far in the past for us.
Yeah.
And I did take notes on all of them except this one. Actually, not accurate. I took one note on this one, but this is not going to be that enlightening because do you want me to read you my only note on,
sure.
on this film that we watched?
Please. ...
Excuse me, what is happening?
That's super unhelpful.
It's extremely unhelpful.
I'm trying to record a podcast here. What are you
I think there
doing?
was some kind of like ghost sequence. There was some kind of like special effects situation that I think was why I was like, what is happening, please?
This goes off the rails.
Yeah.
Not as badly as some that we've talked about, like Mary Pickford's Little Princess.
Yeah.
There was a car chase in it, which that goes off the rails. This doesn't go as off the rails. I feel like, as with every silent movie that we watch, I feel like they really have to struggle to be relevant to modern audiences.
Yes.
And sometimes we watch silent movies that are interesting and engaging on their own merits. And sometimes we watch them that are like this, where like it's important to film history. And if you're really into Pollyanna, you should watch it because it is easy to watch and it's not very long. But I don't want to sit here and go like, oh, it is so much more successful. It's so much more engaging than anyone gives it credit for. Like, this was not engaging. This is like, it's far too fast. For one thing, like, it gets through the story way too fast. Can I give an example of what I'm talking about?
Yes.
As I describe in the book, Pollyanna brings home a cat and a dog. And Aunt Polly is like, no, I couldn't possibly, but I feel like I'm losing control of my life. And all of this is stuff that makes Pollyanna believe that when Jimmy Bean is talking to her about how sad he is about being an orphan, then she's going to be like, well, Aunt Polly is the kindest person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
She'll take you in because I have proof to show me that she does that. This one is so short that they skip the cat and the dog, and like, she's only been living with Aunt Polly for as far as screen time goes, a few minutes.
Yeah.
And she meets Jimmy Bean and is immediately like, come back to my house. My Aunt Polly will adopt you. Like, dramatically, it doesn't make any sense.
It's very chaotic.
Yeah.
It's very this version is very chaotic.
Like, way too fast. There's a thing in it where the characters don't even feel right. Like, the characters in the book, like Aunt Polly is written so clearly in the book. The type of uptight that she is, I feel like, is really well defined. So there's a thing that happens in the book where Pollyanna is in her room and trying to sleep at night. It's too hot, so she goes out and sleeps on the roof. And everybody freaks the fuck out. Right? Because they can't find her, and they find her on the roof, and Aunt Polly, her reaction in the book is, well, if I can't trust you to sleep in your room, you're going to sleep in my bed with me.
Yeah.
And Pollyanna goes, "This is the most amazing thing ever. I love you.
I'd love to do that.
This
yeah.
is incredible." Something we didn't talk about before that is also a really nice subplot in the book is that Aunt Polly keeps being frustrated that every time she tries to punish Pollyanna, Pollyanna's like, "Oh no, that's great. What are you
It's great.
talking
I
about?
love it. You're sending me to my room. That's where my stuff is.
Yeah, like, oh, you're making me eat bread and milk for dinner? That's fine. I love bread and milk. That's great." So, but in this version of it, they find her on the roof. Aunt Polly like brings her in the window and scolds her, and she says, "Go back to your room." But she sends her back to her room by way of the roof, which doesn't make any sense for the character because Aunt Polly is not the type of person who getting the kid off the roof, something so absolutely outside the bounds of what a normal person, a good person, a decent person should do, would ever say, "Go back out there."
Yeah. The other thing I do remember about the actress that played Aunt Polly in this is that they definitely needed to cast someone very, very tall because Mary Pickford is an adult. And like this woman is like the tallest woman I've ever she's very tall.
Yeah.
Very, very tall. Yeah, and then there's a weird scene between Pollyanna and Jimmy Bean. Do you remember this?
Are you talking about the basement?
No, they're like outside and they're like having some kind of argument about something.
Yeah.
This is really good podcasting. They're outside. They're talking. They're arguing. I don't know.
Sweetie, maybe read your one note again.
It says, "Excuse me, what is happening?"
I mean, it's probably appropriate for what you're talking
Probably
about. I
accurate.
don't really remember it. Can I talk about the basement, though?
Sure.
So Pollyanna says, "Aunt Polly, adopt this kid." And Aunt Polly says, "Fuck no." And Jimmy Bean's like, "Well, fuck you."
I do remember this now.
And he leaves. But then we cut to like a little while later. And what Pollyanna has done is she has sent Jimmy Bean down to the basement in secret. But Aunt Polly finds out about it. And the thing about it is, again, I get that they're trying to make this entertaining movie, but it does misunderstand the characters at a really fundamental level because one of the things we know from the book about Pollyanna is that she doesn't lie.
Yeah, she does not lie.
She doesn't have it
she doesn't
in her.
She doesn't like do sneaky things.
Like what this reminded me of, I know we keep bringing up Little Princess, but it reminded me of the 90s version of a Little Princess where they add a little like heist movie in the middle of it.
I know.
Like,
yeah.
There's no point to any of it because it's so out of character for Pollyanna. For her to lie about Jimmy Bean being in the basement, I didn't care for that.
Yeah.
Ugh. Blah. Blah. She gets hit by a car. It's like
these silent movies.
They find her
strange.
like under the car.
Yeah.
Like they do one of these things where the car's coming towards her and then they cut and all these people are going,
That was good podcasting.
"Thank you very much." Well, I'm trying to describe a silent movie. Everyone's hands go up to their face to show their horror, and then they cut back over it, and the car's there, and Pollyanna's just lying underneath the car. And anyway, she can't. The movie's like an hour long.
It's
like
fine.
it is. I'm going to go ahead and say this, and maybe this is mean. I think this movie is a failure as an adaptation. It's fine.
It's fine. Hey, do you want to talk about a real treasure of classic cinema?
Sure.
Sure.
No one knows what you're talking about. Tell everyone what you're quoting.
Our kid, he's
Our
very
kid
cute.
is 3 and cute.
He's very cute, and sometimes you ask him to do something, and he goes, "Oh, sure," and it's the cutest freaking thing in the world.
Or he'll go, "Okay."
Okay.
But what's the cutest thing he does? I'm going to go ahead and do this. Hey, you be Calvin. Hey, Calvin, why did you do that?
Well,
it's the cutest thing in the world. It's the cutest thing in the world because he says well, and like whatever is about to come out of his mouth, it has like a 90% chance of being dumb, weird bullshit because he's 3 and it's amazing.
You didn't do the setup quite right. It's Calvin. Here's a very obvious yes or no question. What is the answer?
Oh, yeah.
Yes or no?
Well. Anyway, back on topic.
Yeah.
In 1960, Walt Disney produced a version of Pollyanna that is like the classic version of Pollyanna that everybody knows. It was written and directed by David Swift, who would go on to great success the following year, again reteaming with Disney, again reteaming with Haley Mills for The Parent Trap, which we have covered on this show.
Mm-hmm. It was very good.
Yeah, so we have Haley Mills as Pollyanna, 14 playing 11.
A movie star. A goddamn movie star.
British playing American.
It's fine. It doesn't matter. It's Haley Mills. She's a movie star.
I'm actually going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Did I miss something? Because I was reading something online. I think it might have been Wikipedia or something that it was linking to that said how they explain her British accent in the movie by her dad being like a missionary in the British West Indies or something like that.
No.
Okay, so
no,
like that's the thing.
Absolutely not.
Like,
absolutely not.
I just
not
wanna,
explained. Perhaps in a deleted scene, but not no.
I just want to make sure that I'm not wrong that is like not in the movie at all.
I mean, I guess we'd have to go back and consult like really hard to make sure it's not just like something someone mutters in the background, like some extra like mutters in the background. Like
There's
I
like an
guess,
out of focus letter on her desk that explains
yeah,
everything.
like I guess
for
I don't
3
feel
frames.
confident enough to say no, absolutely not. But like, I don't think so. No.
Like Haley Mills is one of those people who can pull it off. She is British,
Yeah.
but also very good.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever see oh gosh, what was the name of that movie? Is it The Trouble with Angels? That Haley Mills is in?
No, I never saw it.
The movie about the convent?
I genuinely have only ever seen Haley Mills in like 3 things, and it was basically Pollyanna, Parent Trap, and Saved by the Bell.
There's a movie from my childhood that I really, really loved. It's Haley Mills, and Rosalind Russell plays the Mother Superior of this convent school. Basically, Haley Mills and her friend get into a ton of trouble. There's no real antagonist because the Mother Superior is great. It's just like them pulling pranks and
Just
getting into trouble
Catholicism.
in the Catholic school, and then
Yeah.
at the end, Haley Mills becomes a nun. But anyway, the fact that she's British is absolutely never explained.
Yeah.
It's just
But much like this,
yeah.
there is definitely a moment where she is wrapped up in an American flag singing the Star Spangled Banner or singing My Country 'Tis of Thee.
America the Beautiful.
America the Beautiful.
Yeah.
One of those.
One of them.
It is very funny.
It's very funny.
Maybe not intentionally, but it's very funny. But again, she makes up for it because Haley Mills,
Fantastic.
like, fantastic.
I recommend her Instagram also.
Yeah.
She's the most beautiful older woman that you've ever seen.
Mhm.
Like a Helen Mirren level of beauty. She's doing great. She just wrote a book by her memoir.
Yeah.
The end. Haley
Yeah.
Mills is great.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wondering where to go from here. You know, like we could talk about the cast a little bit, but I guess I just want to ask you because I had only ever seen little bits and pieces of this movie when I was a kid.
Yeah.
It was never one I watched
This
all the
is
way
like
through.
a classic of my childhood.
Yeah, and you recently went through watching like all the Disney live action movies, and I watched some of it with you. But this
Yeah.
was the first time I sat down and like actually watched Pollyanna from start to finish. But again, as you were saying,
Yeah, not that recently. I think I did it when Calvin was like a baby.
I mean that's all relatively recently.
All right.
You know, I'm 40 years old, right? I'm very old.
Yeah. Very, very old. What are you asking me? What's the question?
Did you watch this when you were a kid?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's what I just said. I said it was a classic of my childhood.
Yeah.
And you said you didn't. Where are we going from here?
What do you think of it now?
Well, I was certainly watching it with a more critical eye.
Yeah.
I still find it very enjoyable. And I think Haley Mills' performance is really enjoyable. And
Yeah.
I think Jane Wyman is like the platonic ideal of what Aunt Polly should look like. Neither too old nor too young.
She's close to it. She wasn't perfect for me. There's another person who comes up later that for
Yeah.
me was like perfect.
Perfect.
but-
Well, yeah, we'll talk about her later. Also, just like
Oh,
again,
actually, two. Now that I think
yeah,
about it,
I was just thinking of another famously stunningly beautiful actress that played Aunt Polly in a later version, Felicia Rashad. But I thought she was great. I had a little trouble with some of the supporting characters
Yeah.
and some of the weirdnesses of the plot. So first of all, Nancy in this is very sophisticated.
Yep.
She's not like the charming 19-year-old servant girl.
hmm
I mean, she is a servant because we see her like in her maid's outfit.
She's like a personal
occasionally.
assistant, basically.
Yeah, she's definitely more of a personal assistant because she's always very like dressed up like very smartly, and she's sort of hates Pollyanna, like from beginning to end.
Does she?
She just always seems so annoyed by her.
I don't think she hates Pollyanna. She just seems like she always has something she needs to be doing, and Pollyanna is always just kind of getting in her way.
Yeah, she's really grumpy. This is not the last version where Nancy has a love interest,
Mhm.
but she does have a love interest, and there's a whole plot there that I found deeply unnecessary. Why is it the Nancy story?
There's a lot of stuff that gets added to the plot in this one that I have a lot of questions about. Like I understand why Nancy has a love interest.
Yeah.
Because there needs to be a romance. And you can't just have Aunt Polly and Dr. Chilton because there's not much of a romance there. Because certainly, like in the book, they don't even talk
Right.
until almost the end.
Right.
Oh, wait, hang on.
Yeah. No, in this one, he's there from the beginning because Aunt Polly's house is basically apparently being like the biggest house in the town is sort of like where they have their town meetings.
Oh, sorry, what town is this? Beldingsville, right?
Oh, no, this was my favorite thing. And this was so great that it happened in the second version that we watched because it was allowed to become a delightful running joke
Mhm.
throughout every version that we watched. So their last name is Harrington. And the first night that Pollyanna comes to stay, they're having dinner. Aunt Polly sees fit to sort of like make sure she understands like the family status in the town and how she has to like do the family proud and not embarrass anyone and all that. And
this town, by the way, which is apparently not explicitly, but is apparently in Maryland somewhere.
okay.
But really, it's Southern California.
Right. And so she says to Pollyanna, so you know why it's called Harrington Town, right? And we sort of both went, what?
Hang on. What?
What? Excuse me.
What?
First of all, it's called Beldingsville.
Harrington?
Harrington? Is it really called Harrington Town? And then later, like way later in the movie, you see the billboard at the train station, like with the town's name on it. It's just called Harrington.
Right.
It's not called Harrington. But by then the damage was done.
Yeah.
And yes, so they really decided to hang a lantern on the fact that this was an important family in the town by naming the town after them completely unnecessarily. So anyway, her house is basically used as like the town meeting hall. And from the beginning, what we learn is there's like this rift in the town and everybody's mad at each other. And like Aunt Polly's like in charge of the church and is like telling the pastor like what he has to say and like what sermons to make and like which Bible passages to use and all this.
I would say more than that.
Yeah.
The thing that frustrates people is that she's the money.
She's the money.
So, for example, the thing that happens early on in the movie is that there's like a burst water main or something
At
like
the
that
orphanage.
at the orphanage. And the town is saying, well, this is the town's responsibility and we'll figure this out. And she goes, no, this is my responsibility. I am the most important person in town. It is my duty. I will do it. And so, like, she and the mayor are, like, they're at each other a lot. Like, he can't stand her.
Yeah.
Because he's like, if I'm the mayor, what's the point of my fucking job? And the town is like, we want to have some input on this. And she goes, no, it is my duty. I will do everything. And they're like, the orphanage needs to be actually modernized. It needs a lot of work. Don't just put a bunch of money in and control the entire thing. We want to have some say in it. So that's the thing that the whole town is pissed about. Yeah. And is there someone else who's pissed about it?
Dr. Chilton shows up and is just involved. And she's like, oh, it's so nice to see you back in town. It's like, no, she won't even speak to him. What do you mean?
I want to, how did you envision Dr. Chilton when you read the book?
I envision him as being about 40, maybe with a slight baldness of his head.
Yeah.
Maybe with glasses.
Yeah.
A soft brown beard. Possibly not a slender man.
Okay.
But with a robust attractiveness.
So incredibly handsome is what you're saying. I love you too. Like, let me ask you something. He's not like a chiseled movie star.
No.
Right?
No.
Like he's like a middle-aged man who's kind of a nerd.
Yeah.
Like, I think Dr. Chilton's kind of a nerd.
Yeah.
That's the way he's presented. Richard Egan.
Yeah. A chiseled jaw, chiseled brow, chiseled nose, chiseled everything.
Like, just chiseled.
Just
every
chiseled.
single part
Fully
of it.
chiseled.
Chiseled irises, chiseled fingernails, like every single part of it. Like, here, the best thing I could say is that he was in the 300 Spartans, like the old version of 300.
Was he?
And like, yeah, I think he's Leonidas. Like, I think he's the king of the Spartans. Hang on. I need to double check this really quickly. Yeah, he's King Leonidas. He's the Gerard Butler part in the original kind of film telling of the 300 Spartans.
Yeah.
He's a chiseled, goddamn leathery movie star.
Yeah.
And he's mad at Aunt Polly.
Well, they're mad at each other.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Is this an oversimplification? Is the basic message of this movie every woman just needs a good man to tell them what to do?
I mean, that's the G-rated version.
What's the PG-13 rated version?
I don't know. I know what the R-rated version is.
Well, no, in a PG-13 you get one F-bomb. So go ahead and do the PG-13 version.
I wouldn't like to modesty forbids.
But like, that happens like more than once.
Sure.
Because Nancy is in her little relationship.
Right.
And she needs a guy who's just going to tell her what to do.
Yeah.
And Aunt Polly she just needs Dr. Chilton to tell her what to do.
Yeah.
And it's a fucking bummer.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
Because that's not in the book.
It's a bummer, dude. What can I say?
They just add so much stuff. Like the town being all at odds. What's the whole thing they add with the bazaar?
I didn't quite catch what the fight about it was. There's like a carnival in the town. We didn't even mention that Carl Malden's in this movie.
We'll get back to him in a second. Talk about the bazaar.
There's some kind of fight about whether or not is the fight.
Yeah.
Whether they should have a carnival to fundraise for the orphanage versus Aunt Polly just paying for it by herself. Is that what the fight is?
That's my understanding. That is the fight.
All right. That's the fight. So they do have the carnival, Aunt Polly forbids Pollyanna from going, but she does sneak out and go.
Right.
And all the servants like sneak out and go, and they're like stealing flour from Aunt Polly, like to make cakes for it and everything. The cook in this is the same actress that plays the cook in Mary Poppins, which I thought was absolutely adorable.
This is Rita Shaw, I believe.
And then Pollyanna finally gets her doll because she wins the doll because it's rigged. Which is a good lesson for children. She wins the doll, and then sneaking back into the house, oh no, falls out of the tree.
Yeah.
Paralyzed.
Let's back up a little bit.
Okay, sorry.
Because please don't apologize. Like all
and
of that.
sings America the Beautiful wrapped in a flag, as you mentioned before.
So yes, there is the basic idea that the town wants to raise the funds themselves and have control over their own destiny,
etc.,
and not just have the wealthiest, not just have the 1% tell them what to do. Seize the means of production,
etc., etc.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned Carl Malden, and I'm sorry I cut you off and said we'll get back to him.
Yeah.
Let's get back to him now. But in order to do that, before you talk about how much you love Carl Malden, which I know you do.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there are any kind of differences between the way the Reverend Ford is portrayed in the movie versus in the book?
Well, we did forget to mention Reverend Ford at all when we did the plot summary.
Yeah, that's true.
So we need to take it back even further. So Reverend Ford is the Reverend of the town, and he has a very nice wife, and he's very nice. He's very nice. But one of the things he has noticed is that there is a lot of petty squabbling amongst the people in the town, and he's not about that. And he has tried Sunday after Sunday from the pulpit to reach them. And I don't know about how Christian sermons work, but based on my reading of late 19th and early 20th century children's books, it's very like a Torah portion that every week the pastor like picks a passage from the Bible.
He's a reverend, by the way.
Oh, the reverend or the minister.
I actually don't know
or the
difference.
preacher. We've used many different words to describe what he is.
The rabbi. He's the rabbi.
Okay, so what it sounds like what they do is they pick like their text, their weekly Bible verse, and then they write a sermon that relates to that verse in some way and gives the sermon. Does that sound right? Because that's what
I think you've just described a sermon. Yeah,
right. Because that's what that's what a rabbi does.
Yeah,
but it sounds
I think that's what it is for most people.
But in temple, it's always the same. You read the Torah in order.
Yeah.
So there's never any question as to what the Torah portion is going to be, and then there's a sermon about that. It sounds like the preacher, priest, parson.
He's a reverend.
Reverend has more leeway to pick and choose just anything that he likes. Does that sound right to you?
Yes.
Right?
Well, they have so much more book.
They do, but they don't have to read it in order is what I'm saying.
No, that's what I'm saying. They have so much more. There's so much to choose from. They can kind of go wherever they want.
But they're not required to read it in an order.
I don't think so.
Okay. So, because it's different from what our cultural experiences.
It is.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Yes.
And so he is like he's out in a field practicing his sermon, and the Bible passage that he's chosen is something about like the hypocrites in the temple and Jesus and all this thing.
He's been pushed to his breaking point.
Yes, and he's going to read them a very like blistering condemnation sermon. And Pollyanna kind of happens upon him in the field. And she says, "Oh, can I listen to you? I used to listen always to my dad would practice his sermon, so like I understand everything about this." So he's like, "Oh, your dad was a minister?" She's like, "Oh yeah, can I ask you a question?" And he's like, yeah." And she's like, "Do you like being a minister?" And he's like, "Oh, that's interesting. What makes you ask that, dear?" And she says, "Well, it's just sometimes you look kind of sad, and my dad also sometimes used to look kind of sad. And sometimes when he did look sad, I would ask him if he liked being a minister. And he said he did, of course, but he said he wouldn't stay a minister if it wasn't for the rejoicing texts." Reverend Ford says, what is that? And she says, "Oh, like rejoice in the Lord and be glad and be happy and, sing to the Lord and all that stuff. You know those?" And he's like, "Oh, yeah, no, I know." And she said, "Well, one day when my dad was feeling really down and like people in his church were fighting and like he just didn't feel like he was getting through to them, he went home and he stayed up all night and went through the Bible and counted all the rejoicing texts. And there's 800 of them. And he said, if God didn't want us to be glad, he wouldn't have taken the trouble to tell us 800 times to be glad." That's what my dad said. I'm going to go home now. And
Bye-bye.
Bye!
Enjoy the ramifications of this life-changing experience.
And the Reverend goes, huh. And his life from that moment on has changed.
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to say one of two things. You and I think, had a similar reaction to the thing about the rejoicing text. You came to me and told me something. What do you want to tell me what that was?
I just said I don't hate this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't hate it at all.
Because you're not one for sort of Christianity.
No, like
in general.
Yeah, just religiosity in general is just not my bag.
Right.
It isn't my bag. But like, if you're gonna write a story that is a very like in its essence a very Christian story, which this is, like, at least that's not the worst thing in the world to focus on.
It's not. And the other thing that I also like it.
Yeah.
But the thing I said to you and the sort of insight that I think I had was like, you know why I think we're both responding to it really positively?
Mm-hmm.
And you said why? And I was like, it's really Jewish.
It's very Jewish.
The idea of like, if God had not wanted us to be joyful, why would he have told us 800 times is like a Talmudic scholar. Like that should be that might be in the Talmud.
Yeah.
Like that's what that feels like to me is like Talmudic commentary.
Like Pollyanna is literally sitting next to Tevye and all of the learned men.
The learned men.
Yeah.
So anyway, we both actually sort of had a positive response to that. So anyway, that's Reverend Ford. To bring it back to Carl Malden, he plays Reverend Ford. And I think the big change that they made is in the book, Reverend Ford is like, everything I've done so far hasn't worked. I'm going to try to do the thing where I yell and scream at them. And in the movie, I think the difference is he always yells and screams at them. That's like his thing.
Everything in the movie is just escalated.
Right.
All of it. All of it. Oh, this thing that became like a character development for this character? No, this is their entire characterization.
Right.
This is everything.
And so she basically, instead of talking him out of this next step that he's going to take, it's just like this huge change in his demeanor. Because we see him doing this very like fire and brimstone preaching. And we also hear him being like kind of wishy-washy about like the whole Bizarre versus Polly Harrington thing. Like, oh, I can't take sides and this and that. And then he like one Sunday he like stands up in the pulpit and talks about the rejoicing texts.
The glad text.
The glad texts.
Because they have to simplify it
right.
for the movie. And that annoyed me.
Yeah.
It just, because it was one of the things that I responded to in the book.
Right.
And so for them to say like, well, no, the rejoicing text audiences aren't really going to understand that. We're going to call it the glad text.
Right.
Because of the glad game.
Right.
Also, he basically explains the glad game in his sermon to everyone.
Yeah. But the big change we do see him make is we saw him say, I'm not going to take sides, I'm not going to take sides. And then he does stand up in the pulpit and says, everyone get your butts to that bazaar. I'm endorsing the bazaar. Like, quick on this. I know we've been on this one for a while, but Agnes Moorehead as Mrs. Snow is really, really good and very funny.
I love Agnes Moorehead so much. She's incredible. Like, it's not Mrs. Snow from the book necessarily, but Agnes Moorehead, like, the thing I feel like everyone needs to remember about Agnes Moorehead is she was part of Orson Welles' crew. Like, she can create a goddamn character. She's amazing and hysterical, and I love her. And she can be in everything. Like, I don't know why she's not working as much today as she used to, but she's wonderful.
Is she alive?
No, R.I.P.
She'd be 150.
R.I.P. She's wonderful. I guess the thing I just want to say before we move on is that, like, I was annoyed about the number of ways that they just try to escalate everything and add so much to the story.
Yeah.
Like, timeline is really compressed. So, like, the night of the bazaar, it has to be the night that she hurts herself. They didn't want to do a car because that was like a little too dark, I guess. Like, everything is escalated. We talk about Carl Malden extensively. They just make a lot of changes that I feel like make the movie less interesting than the book was.
Yeah.
Just characters end up being less interesting. Like, I find this Dr. Chilton less interesting than the Dr. Chilton in the book.
Yeah.
I find this Aunt Polly less interesting than the Aunt Polly in the book. I find this Nancy way less interesting than the Nancy in the book.
I really don't like this Nancy.
She does nothing for me.
Yeah.
Like, and we could get into all the little stuff here and there. I feel like the movie has, I would say, like, two things going for it that are really genuinely good.
Well, I know what one of them is.
What's one of them?
Haley Mills.
She's incredible. Like, she's incredible. She's incredible.
She carries the movie. Carries the movie. I mean, it's like a long movie too. Like
Yeah.
it's not a short movie.
And in the same way she carries The Parent Trap.
Yeah.
Like it's weird that we actually didn't spend that much time talking about how great she is because
We spent some time.
we did, but like I think everyone's pretty sold on Haley Mills
Yeah.
being great. So
Yeah.
there's not a lot to say. She carries the movie. The other thing too, this movie's gorgeous. Like
Yeah.
there's something about just like Disney movies from this era. Nothing else looked like a Disney movie at the time. No other live action movie I've ever seen from 1960 looks like this movie. It is a beautiful movie to look at. The design is incredible. The production design is great. It's beautifully shot. Like it is a great looking movie with a great performance and a great interpretation of the main character at the middle of it. I can understand why it's a classic, but I do think it makes a lot of annoying changes that take some of the things that make the book so special and kind of remove it and just heighten everything, I would say, for no reason.
Fair enough.
Also, there's a whole thing at the end where, like, after she's hurt and they're carrying her out of the house and the entire town has come to all tell her. My problem isn't that, like, everybody came to talk about how great she is and how silly. Like, whatever. That's not the problem. The problem is the doctors picked up this girl who has suffered, like, a spinal cord injury and is just carrying her to the car in his arms.
Just like in a fireman's carry.
Like, that can't be good. That has to be
surely bad.
And it's just so basically what they've done is they've taken a book that was written with no medical expertise whatsoever and just doubled down on that complete ignorance of anything medical. That, like, I understand that that's not the thing that most people give a shit about, but it took me out of it, and I was annoyed by it. Don't touch my leg telling me to calm down.
All right.
Also, and I know that I'm nitpicking, when Dr. Chilton carries her out of the house and all the people are looking at her legs are moving.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
I think
also
they're also moving in the bed when
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Like, I'm nitpicking because it's a good movie that is
Sure.
ultimately very successful.
Yeah.
And is really fun.
That's fair.
But it annoyed me. It annoyed me. Would you like to move on? 13 years.
I would.
1973, there was a miniseries. It was a British miniseries. And our big question at first was, where does this take place?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we had, after watching a couple of versions, we had our little epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to tell everyone the conclusion we came to?
I mean, I think the conclusion that we came to is that the story of Pollyanna is really time and place agnostic.
Mhm.
Like, I don't think there's anything specifically about the story other than like a certain type of religion that becomes important that makes it specific to Vermont in 1913, right?
I mean, Christianity is very important in the story, but I don't know if you know this about Christianity.
It's popular.
It's everywhere.
It's been popular for a while. Yeah. So like, as you say. So, with Haley Mills being British, one of the things we were talking about was like, I mean, you could set this in England.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason it couldn't be. And then we watched this one and we're confused for a while about where the setting was.
I'm honestly, like, here's my big question about the 1973 miniseries. It felt very unsuccessful to me.
Yeah.
But I wonder how much of my negative opinion on it would have been changed just by changing the setting to Britain.
Right.
And letting everybody have their real accent.
Right.
Except for Elaine Stritch.
Right. Who was doing sort of a heightened...
I mean, she just sounded like Elaine Stritch.
Yeah. Okay, so Elaine Stritch plays Aunt Polly.
Yeah, so this was a miniseries aired on British TV in 1973, directed by June Wyndham Davies, who also the next year directed that Heidi miniseries that we really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
It was written by Joy Harrington. It starred, as we said...
well, that's a coincidence.
Joy Harrington?
Harrington?
Yes.
Harrington?
Yeah, you're right.
Joy Harrington of Harrington?
Literally did not register with me.
Fascinating.
We already mentioned Elaine Stritch as Aunt Polly and starred Elizabeth Archard as Pollyanna.
Yeah.
Who is a tiny British child.
A tiny British child.
Playing an American Pollyanna.
In a sense. Doing her best.
She's doing, everyone's kind of doing, I assume everyone is doing their best.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
unfortunately,
their best
was not good enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and say it. Like, it's easy for me to sit here in my very comfortable chair here in front of a microphone without showing my face to anybody and
Yeah.
say their best was not good enough.
In a state of complete anonymity. Plus, many of these people probably now dead.
Yeah.
Elaine Stritch.
She made it a good long while,
Yeah,
though.
she did.
I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself
A bit.
here.
A bit.
Would you like to talk about this version a little bit? What are some of your observations about this one?
All of my notes, I would say, well, that's an exaggeration. Most of my notes are observations on the accent work and
Yep.
how distracting it was. So that is sort of the bulk of my remembrance of what was going on here. And also a note, oh no, it's Oliver Twist.
Are you talking about Jimmy Bean?
Yeah, with his bindle.
Yeah.
You remember he looked like very sickly in this one and had sort of a bindle situation
I mean, let me ask
and a
you
bad
this.
accent.
Let me ask you this. Who
Yeah.
had the worst accent work in this? Was it Nancy or was it Jimmy Bean?
Oh God, Nancy's was really bad too. I think it was Jimmy Bean, but because he's a child, I'm going to go easy on him and say Nancy, because Nancy's was really bad.
Yeah, let's attack the adult.
Yeah.
Let's attack the adult who doesn't deserve it instead of the child who doesn't deserve it.
Her acting wasn't amazing either.
I mean, but that's my question is like how much of our interpretation of the bad acting in this, like quote unquote bad acting, was bad accent work?
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Like, it has to be distracting for an actor to be doing an accent.
Yeah.
It's hard to act through an accent.
Yeah.
But also, if they had just they didn't need that. They
Yeah.
could have just gotten rid of the entire thing. They
Yeah.
could have just said, hey, we're British. Let's just be British.
They could have.
And the story will still work.
Didn't choose to.
No, they didn't. And I feel that while I feel that my appraisal is unfair, potentially.
Yeah.
Because they were working against something really hard
Yeah.
with this. I guess, should we just go through our notes and get all the accent stuff out of the way?
I think that's fine because I just turned the page on my notebook and realized I have half a page of notes that I didn't realize was there.
Oh, goodness. There's a second
There's
page
a
to
second
the test.
page.
Okay, so Nancy is terrible. Her accent is ridiculous. It is this weird, sometimes American, sometimes British. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's not so good. Every time Nancy or Pollyanna talk, it's a pickle.
Yeah.
That was...
Or Jimmy Bean.
Yeah. Well, I think I wrote that down before we met Jimmy Bean.
Yeah.
I was like, every time Nancy or Pollyanna talk, it's a pickle. This accent work is really bad. But is the production good? Also no.
I also wrote Nancy's got a cheeky love interest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is something now we're going to see multiple times.
Yeah.
Mrs. Snow, that accent was really bad too.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't work so well. That's actually all I have for accent work, and the rest of my notes are about other stuff that was weird.
Okay, talk about the other stuff that was weird.
I mean, do you have anything to say about other stuff that was weird?
Yes.
I'm kick it over to you.
I think this is the segment called Ari doesn't understand Ari's own notes.
Fantastic.
Because we've had that segment before.
Yeah.
Can I just can I just read a couple?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote down. So this is anything non-accent related. I wrote, "Shut up. Who are you?"
Who was that?
I don't know.
Was that Aunt Polly talking? I think it was Aunt Polly talking to Nancy. Maybe.
I don't know.
Wasn't there a scene where near the beginning where Aunt Polly is talking to Nancy and Nancy definitely says something like out of turn?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it is.
Maybe.
Anyway, please continue.
I wrote. She looks exactly the same, which I think is
Who looks exactly the same?
I wrote she, so that's helpful.
Great.
It's either Mrs. Snow's makeover or Aunt Polly's makeover. I think it's Aunt Polly's makeover.
Oh yeah, and Elaine Stritch is like looking in the mirror
Yeah,
and looking
and
like, oh my God, look how
And
beautiful
she looks
I am.
exactly the same.
Yeah.
Pendleton in this is menacing and creepy,
Yeah.
hanging out in the woods with a child.
Yes.
I did write down I hate Jimmy Bean.
Yeah. Well, can we talk about the Pendleton thing for a
Yeah,
second?
yeah.
So like this, at this point when we were watching it, I thought maybe you can't do the Pendleton plot because the whole thing is, I'm not even sure we even really mentioned it. But the thing Pendleton wants is he wants to adopt Pollyanna.
Right.
He says to Pollyanna, I want you to come live with me. And when she says, why? And he says, well, as you can see on my PowerPoint, I have two main bullets.
Yeah.
Item number 1, Aunt Polly doesn't love you and never will because she can't.
Right.
Whether that's true or not, like that's still the first point of his presentation.
Whomst can say.
The second point of his presentation is, I was in love with your mother and this is important to me.
Right.
Which, here's the thing, both of those points are bullshit.
Right.
And at least the first one is like normal manipulative, But the
Yeah.
second one is like really creepy and awful manipulative.
Yeah, because what does that have to? If I were Pollyanna, I'd be like, yeah, but what does that have to do with me?
Yeah, like you had a crush on my mom.
Yeah,
you had
before I was
you
born.
had an unrequited crush on my mom.
There's probably people that had unrequited crushes on my mom before I was born. Like
Yeah.
that doesn't mean I should go live with them.
Like the idea that someone that like asked you out I'm thinking of it in terms of like, let's say like someone asked you out one time and you said no, and then me dying and them going, I want to adopt Calvin.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh no.
it's fucked up.
That's awful.
It's
yeah.
super fucked up. And so this one made me think, this one handled the Pendleton plot so poorly that I honestly was making me think that you can't even do the Pendleton plot. Like you can't even do it because it's too creepy. This one, everything about it made me think you have no right to ask her this.
Yeah.
This is terrible.
Yeah.
And I do think there is a way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we can talk about it a little bit later if it comes up. But what I'm saying is this one did it very, very poorly.
Yeah, very, very poorly.
Sorry, you were talking about Jimmy Bean.
I was talking about Jimmy Bean and that I hate him. That was really
Yeah.
the sort of bulk of my argument is that he's just awful.
It's the kind of thing where I feel like Nancy's accent went back and forth between like kind of a broken American accent.
Yeah.
It was always a bad American accent. It was sometimes like an okay American accent, but never better than that.
Yeah.
And sometimes a really broken American accent where you could tell she was British.
Yeah.
Jimmy Bean went back and forth between like Cockney and bad American accent.
Yeah.
Like full on Cockney.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it didn't work.
It did not work. So one of the things we didn't mention when we did the plot summary, because it's not important even a little, is
well,
that
it's a little important. You're talking about
I guess
it now.
so. Is that one of the people that comes to the house to tell Aunt Polly what a great person Pollyanna is and what an impact she's made on our life and all that is this lady of sort of ill repute in the town, shall we say? And she just is of low class, and she lives up on a hill with her husband and her 2 kids, and like maybe they're not married. Like I think that's sort of the implication. Like they're going through some tough times, and it may be that their morals are perhaps not what they should be.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like sort of a little blip in the book, and I think it's a little blip in the Haley Mills movie. Maybe I can't really remember.
I didn't think it was in the Haley Mills one.
I can't remember. She's in a couple of them, but briefly. But like they spend so much. I can't remember what the woman's name is. I can't remember what the character's name is. She misses something, but they spend so much time on her in this one. Like really, like a drawn out length of time. Like we see her without Pollyanna present. Like we see her story. Like she's with Dr. Chilton.
This is the one where she's hitting on Dr. Chilton.
She's hitting
right?
on Dr. Chilton, and Dr. Chilton is giving her the advice like, hey, you have these 2 kids. You really probably should get married. And she's like, yeah, no, I know. We're gonna get around to it. One of these days. They just inexplicably, it's just one of these things where you're watching something and you're like, I know there's a finite amount of time that you have to tell this story, and I truly don't understand why you're choosing to spend some percentage of it on this, because what the fuck does this have to do with the shark?
Yeah.
I have one more note.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is regarding Pollyanna's accident. Do you remember if she falls off something in this one or if she gets hit by a car?
No, she falls off something.
Because what I wrote down is what I assume what her acting was.
Here, let me
what
just.
her acting was like.
What was your note?
I wrote stopped, screamed, jumped.
Yeah. I'm going to describe it the way that the filmmakers describe it. In our version, she doesn't get hit by a car. She falls off a log. I don't know why I decided that they have that accent.
They definitely don't.
But the thing is, she doesn't fall off a log.
Yeah.
As you say, she's walking across a log going over a ravine.
Because it's kind of in slow motion,
Yep.
too.
She stops, screams, and then falls off the log.
Jumps off the log.
Like, it clearly was their best take,
Yeah.
and it's a bad take. Like, it's bad. It's very bad. It's bad. It just takes you out of it, which is funny because you don't even need to see the accident on screen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like they chose to film it.
Yeah.
They chose to show us
not necessary.
the incident happening. They could have fixed it in editing. She could have been walking across, and then we have another character go, "Oh no."
Or it could have been like the Haley Mills one where just the silent one where just suddenly she's under the car.
Yeah. Well, they decided not to do a car for this one. We've now seen 3 times, and it's never really quite been what the book is.
All right.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
My note is, I remember what it is. Okay. There's a scene in the kitchen. Nancy is talking to Timothy?
Timifer?
Young Tim, not old Tom.
Not old Tom.
I can't remember who else is in the scene. Doesn't really matter.
Does not matter.
But he needs to leave very quickly. I believe it's the two of them talking to Pollyanna.
Yeah.
And he goes to leave, and as he's going to leave, he kicks a chair.
Yeah.
And just kicks it and goes, damn it, and then keeps going. And I genuinely believe that it was a real accident.
Yeah, of course it was. There's no damn it in this movie.
Because this miniseries really feels like they didn't do second takes, because like Pollyanna, for example, she steps on people's lines.
Oh, constantly.
Yeah. Like they did not do second takes in this. And if they did second takes, clearly it was only two.
Mm-hmm.
So just for this one moment, I think it's worth watching because it's very, very funny.
Yeah.
Like I feel like we haven't talked about this one for very long, and we don't have much to say about it other than the accent work is terrible.
I think the accents were distracting. I think the production quality was distracting. And I think a lot of times when we have we're gently making fun of something, we're like, well, but here are some redeeming things about it. I'm not saying it was offensive. I'm just saying I don't have anything that was notable to talk about that was particularly good. Like
even Elaine Stritch, who's great, but not in this. Like she's fine in this.
Yeah.
She felt like she showed up and did her job.
Yeah.
But
yeah, good for her.
I'm sure she
got paid.
Flew in, did it, got paid, flew out.
Yeah, did some.
Or maybe she was doing something in the West End. Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows?
I think she's miscast.
Yeah, she is miscast. She's pretty terribly miscast.
Yeah, I mean she's too old. She's too old to be Aunt Polly.
Yeah.
Like she's too old to be Aunt Polly.
Yeah.
She's too old to be Mrs. Snow, but she could have been Mrs. Snow.
Yeah.
Let's
move on.
Like I feel bad. Let me just say before we move on, I don't blame anybody involved in who was cast in this. I don't blame any of the actors. I don't think this was their fault. This doesn't work. It was very poor, and we did not enjoy watching it. But
if you're listening, we don't blame you.
We don't blame any of them. And the whole thing's on YouTube. If you want to watch it, go for it. If you're a Pollyanna stan and you want to watch everything that Pollyanna's ever been in, watch it. But don't expect too much.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we've set your expectations so low that you will watch it and you will love it.
Yeah. Who can say?
Anyway.
Pollyanna, Girl of Love.
Yeah, so this was the anime series. Again, I'm gonna start this by apologizing.
We didn't watch very much of it.
I'm very sorry to our listening audience. We did not, with this particular one, do a good job watching it so that we could talk to you about it.
Yeah.
In 1986, there was an anime series. We've covered many of these. It was done by Nippon Animation. They also did Anne of Green Gables. They did The Little Princess. As you say, The Story of Pollyanna, Girl of Love, directed by Kozo Kasuba, written by Chisako Kuki and Akai Kunihiro. When did you get set against this version?
Oh, before we began.
Before we began?
Well, I hate to be offensive to our listeners who enjoy the anime, but I think what it is not that I don't enjoy it, because I really liked Akage no An.
Yeah.
I really, really liked it. And even some of the Little Princess, I think, and the Les Mis, I've enjoyed many of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I get overwhelmed by the fact that many of these are 40 episodes.
This is 51 episodes.
Yeah. And so I always know going into it, we're certainly not going to be able to watch the whole thing. And I don't know. I think I always find it overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Did you think I was going to say something different?
Well, I thought we checked out in the first episode.
We did a bit.
Because we realized what they were doing to fill the time.
Yeah.
Because what they decided to do was not something that they've done in past ones, which is Akage no An, for example.
Yeah.
In Akage no An, they start the story exactly where the book starts.
Yes.
And we get this very lovingly recreated version of the way the book starts.
Yeah. And the thing I really loved about Akage no An is that every episode is basically a chapter.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't add a bunch of extra stuff.
We didn't watch all of it, so we can't 100% say that. But
in the other ones we've seen, they've mostly added extra stuff.
Especially right at the beginning.
Yeah, right at the beginning.
Akage no An was very book accurate for what we watched.
Yes.
This one is not.
Yes.
This one decided, here's how we're going to stretch this out. We are not going to start where the book starts. We're going to start well before the book starts.
Way before.
It takes several episodes for Pollyanna's dad to die because he's there.
Yeah.
The whole thing takes place before he dies.
Yes.
We get to see Pollyanna's entire origin story. We get to see the origin of the Glad game.
Yeah.
I guess it made us really ask, why does this need to be part of the story?
Mm-hmm.
when it was never part of the story.
Right.
Like-
Like I'd almost rather see like Aunt Polly's backstory because her backstory is actually important to the plot.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're going to go that far, why not go all the way back to like Pollyanna's mother? Like you can start any story, you can start at any point. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing about storytelling. Like one important thing about storytelling is knowing where to start and where to stop, because this is me getting into my dramaturgy degree. But like any story, obviously you can extend out. Like nothing just starts in a moment in time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you could go back further. I don't know why they chose to start it as they did.
Here's a pitch. Why don't you start it the way the book starts?
That would be great.
And then go halfway through, 2/3 of the way through, until things get revealed about the history of, Aunt Polly and Mr. Pendleton and Dr. Chilton. And then if you want to extend to 51 episodes, take a break for a bunch of episodes and do like 6 episodes showing us their whole backstory.
Sure.
Cut back and then get
Yeah.
back into Pollyanna's story.
Why not?
Because at least that way the story starts the way the story is supposed to start.
Yeah.
But they still get to extend it. Like, this is really bad pod, and I think we've made this joke before, but like so many of these shows feel like it's that person standing in the wings just doing the stretch it out hand gesture. Keep going, stretch it out, stretch it out. This was, I'm going to go ahead and say, the most insufferable thing that we've watched of any anime so far. And Treasure Island was pretty insufferable.
Yeah.
And even Les Mis was pretty insufferable.
It was I don't know. Les Mis and Treasure Island had the benefit of having like a little bit of goofiness. This was just like very, very sweet.
Incredibly earnest.
Yeah.
But we start at the beginning with her dad. We get him saying, "Pollyanna, you must look for things to be glad about." I think that's his last line before he dies.
Well, he has like,
Pollyanna,
a couple
you
like
must
fake
look
deaths.
for things to be glad about.
He has like a couple fake deaths because we like think he's dead, but then it turns out like at the beginning of the next episode he actually was okay. You know,
we meet all the ladies from the Ladies' Aid. We meet everything. Also, they make a really big change because Pollyanna's not 11 in this anymore. Now she's 8.
Yeah.
Because they wanted to make her cuter.
Yeah.
They wanted to make her tinier and cuter. It's like they wanted her to fit in the costumes for the other characters from the other shows, but it's animated, so it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, there's nothing as good in this one. Not even one moment as good as Long John Silver hopping down the alleyway on one leg, like with his sword, because that was amazing.
Yeah. I will say Aunt Polly and Nancy are perfect.
Yeah.
Like,
the character design in these is often very good.
Yeah.
Like if not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, it's unfortunate that they decided to make a really big change with Pollyanna because she doesn't look like, that's not Pollyanna.
Yeah.
Like it isn't. It's a different character. But when Aunt Polly and Nancy finally do show up, they are perfect, and Nancy is perfect. And this was a breath of fresh air for us because now we'd watched the Disney version where Nancy is not Nancy from the book.
Yeah.
And we've watched the British version where Nancy is like in characterization closer to Nancy from the book, but also because it was such an unsuccessful portrayal, it was really unsatisfying.
Yeah.
At least this Nancy is the Nancy from the book.
Yeah.
We finally got in episode 4. Episode 4 is the one that should have been episode 1. And it was after that I wrote down, like, just acknowledging what it was like for us to sit there and watch this. Like, just ask the question, why do we have so little patience for this shit?
Yeah.
Because we were over it.
Yeah.
And then go ahead. Sorry, I have things to yell about. Please go ahead.
I think, well, I'm just trying to answer your question. Why were we over it?
Yeah.
I think there are some properties that lend themselves to a deeper investigation.
Mm-hmm.
I think Anne of Green Gables is one of them, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
we loved Anne with an E
Mhm.
because it really, like, it's like, you know what? This character is fascinating. We're going to do the book, but then we're going to do more.
Mhm.
And we were like, yes, we are here for it.
Even though it turns into Degrassi Junior High, like, even though it does,
even
it's
that.
still fun.
And even though the character died of sepsis, looking beautiful, beautiful as on her wedding day, and I don't think that's how that works. Still annoyed about that. What was I saying? I think there are some properties that have a depth to them that bear this type of investigation,
Mhm.
and I think there are some that don't. And I guess I would propose or suggest that although Pollyanna is a lovely story,
Mhm.
and I'm glad we did this episode, I think any property that's really trying to do a deeper dive into Pollyanna, I think the unfortunate thing is there's not much below the surface.
Yeah.
Like it's all there. It's all on the surface.
I mean, it did take us 124 episodes to cover Pollyanna. How many episodes did it take us to cover Anne of Green Gables?
Oh, I think that would be one.
1.
Yeah.
1. We couldn't go one episode without talking about Anne of Green Gables.
Not a single one.
Can I yell about one more thing before we go?
Yes.
Okay. Suddenly, like 4 or 5 episodes in, there's suddenly narration.
You
Like,
hate that.
I hate it.
You hate that.
I hate it. Like, they had 51 episodes and they still needed to resort to narration for exposition. They couldn't use any of that time to show us something happening. They had to have somebody narrating it. And that was another thing that upset me, is that there's this really inconsistent way that they're portraying the story, where like we had gone episodes without hearing it. And then suddenly they decide to throw it in multiple episodes in. Like, I hated it. I hated it. And we were out at 5 episodes.
Yeah.
Like, we finally we just couldn't do anymore.
Yeah.
We were done. Even though that's when the story first started.
Yes.
We were done.
Yeah.
We were
so
done.
our apologies.
I'm very sorry that we got so mad about this one and peaced out.
I am really excited to talk about the next one.
Yeah, let's do it. In 1989, on The Wonderful World of Disney, a TV movie was produced called Polly. It's weird. It's a remake of the Disney Pollyanna.
For sure.
Okay. So we're now like 2 adaptations removed from the source material.
Yeah, it's Pollyanna's all the way down.
I want to talk about the bona fides of the creators. It was, I'll start with the writer. It was written by W.F. Blinn. Here are some things about him. He created Starsky and Hutch. He wrote 11 episodes of Fame. He wrote the screenplay for Purple Rain and won Emmy Awards for writing Brian's Song and co-writing Roots.
Wow.
That's some bona fides.
That's legit.
It was directed by Debbie Allen.
I mean,
she's a powerhouse.
She's legit.
Like, super legit. 5 Emmy Awards,
Yep.
2 Tony Awards, a Golden Globe.
Yep.
She was the principal choreographer and star of Fame, the 1980 movie, and the 82 to 87 series.
Correct.
And she's Felicia Rashad's sister. I didn't know that she and Felicia Rashad were sisters.
Oh, yeah.
It's amazing. And you know what? She gets a great performance out of her sister Felicia.
Yeah, we'll come to Felicia in a second. Is there anything else you want to say about the production team?
No, that's the production team. I'm just saying, like, Disney had a chance to remake this. They decided to get some pretty big guns to do it. And they made something that I think is flawed.
Yeah, but
the quality's there.
Yeah. I have something that I want to say about perfect casting.
Okay.
I don't know if you cast your mind back.
Yep.
To when we did Princess Bride.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main characters, Buttercup in Princess Bride, is the most beautiful woman in the world.
Yes.
And one of the things we talked about was this is a really good way to show, not tell, through your casting.
Mm-hmm.
Because if someone is supposed to be the most beautiful woman in the world, you don't have to talk a lot about it if the person that you cast is Robin Wright. Because she is, in fact, one of the most beautiful women in the world.
Yes.
If you want an Aunt Polly, who is a woman of younger middle years, but who is, you want it to be obvious that that person is a young woman with love to give, but still a mature woman. But also in the book, one of the things that they talk about is like, she doesn't like dress to show herself off, but she is a very beautiful woman. I think you could not go far wrong with casting one of the most beautiful women in the world. But also everyone's mom.
Yeah.
Felicia Rashad. Peak beautiful mommy. Felicia Rashad.
It's beautiful casting.
She's so beautiful.
And but she's so scary too.
Yeah, no, she's terrifying because she's mommy. She's beautiful mommy.
Yeah. Like she is so severe.
Yes.
And so she does exactly what Aunt Polly is supposed to be in the book.
Yes.
Anyone would look at her and go, man, she is very beautiful. But then, like, did you talk to her?
Yeah, she's terrifying.
Oh, she's terrifying. She scares me. She's great. And she isn't the only good casting in this.
Yes.
But she is, as you say, choice casting.
Do you want to talk about Pollyanna herself?
Let's talk about Keisha Knight Pulliam.
Oh my God, she's so cute.
So cute. So cute is she. So, I mean, let's just acknowledge the thing about this, which is that they've changed the context of the story.
They've changed the time and place.
Yeah. And it is now a story about Black characters.
Yes.
And it works. It works for what they're trying to tell.
Yeah. And
to a certain degree.
It's so interesting because we have a character come from one society to another and sort of inject her energy into this, like, where are they in Atlanta?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're in this sort of like,
well, it's not in Atlanta, but I think it is.
It's the South. Yeah. But it's the sort of more traditional, formal culture. And Pollyanna comes down from Detroit and she's like, hey, can I tell you something? We have great music up there. Can I share that with you?
Yeah.
Like, Oh, by the way, this is a musical. Just
Well, there's a number of things that are kind of buried in what you're saying. Like, first of
yeah.
all, it is a musical.
Yes.
Second of all, it is the 50s?
It's 50s or 60s?
I thought, didn't you say like this must be the 60s, but then it turns out no, it's the 50s.
I think it's the 50s. Yeah.
So the music was, but bops all around.
Yeah.
Just bop after
The
bop.
music is really good.
Big dance numbers. I mean, you got Debbie Allen directing it. Like, it's going to have big dance numbers.
Yeah.
And they're going to be big fun dance numbers. But yeah, like, it's kind of weird. It's like a surprise musical.
Yeah.
Where, like, it doesn't start as a musical. I feel like every musical has that big opening number, right?
This does not have that. Yeah, the fact that it's a musical is a big surprise. Like, Pollyanna comes to town. She's like, hey, I'm going to sing and dance. It's a montage and a song.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, it's a musical.
It's the Pretty Woman montage,
Yeah,
right? Except
yeah.
like the 10-year-old
That's right.
Polly version of
Trying
the Pretty
on
Woman.
her new clothes, yeah.
Yeah, and like, so that it's just ultimately, I don't know how successful it is. It is weird and oddly paced and just strange. It is a strange production.
It's unusual.
But like, it's so much fun that it works.
Yeah. Well, okay. Celeste Holm is in it.
Yes.
She's Miss
Snow.
And there's a whole thing. There's a plot that I didn't really catch until the end about a bridge that burned down.
Can I describe it?
Yeah.
Best to my knowledge, I'm going to spoil as much as I can.
Yes.
There's the town, and there are two halves of the town, or it's two towns, whatever it is.
I think it's two halves of the town.
Yeah, I think it is Harrington because it is, again, an adaptation of
right.
the Disney version.
Yes, it is Harrington, the Glad Town.
Yeah.
Because they do that at the end with the sign
Right.
on the railroad junction or whatever.
But there were two towns that were joined by a bridge over a little river. Even though the river, it's like in Men in Tights.
Yeah, there's you could step across it easily.
You really could. But there was a bridge going across them, and it was both a literal bridge and a figurative bridge.
Yes.
And
the bridge of segregation.
And the bridge burned down.
Yeah.
And when the bridge burned down, the two sides stopped talking to each other, the white side and the black side.
Yeah.
And they never talked to each other. And everyone has their ideas about who burned it down.
Yeah.
Like, some people, like, there are people on the white side who think it was the black people that burned it down because they didn't want to talk to white people anymore, and vice versa. And everyone has their ideas about it. We do find out, in fact, who burned it down. And it was Mr. Pendergast. Oh, that was the other thing
they
we
changed
didn't
his
say.
name to Pendergast.
Yeah, in the Haley Mills one, Pendleton is Pendergast.
Yeah, for some reason.
And they keep that character name in this one, but in this one he's played by Brock Peters.
He's so good.
Who's goddamn royalty,
Yeah.
and he's amazing. But he's got like they really do a thing with him and Celeste Holm.
They've got they're like a sort of a love interest, right?
Yeah.
And it's implied that they were a love interest back then, but then they were sort of separated by the breach in the town, and they couldn't be together.
Like, I think she thinks that he burned down the bridge on purpose because he was the one who was charged with watching it that night.
And he did burn down the bridge.
But it was an accident.
Yeah.
He was like smoking a cigar or something and accidentally set the bridge on fire.
This was all a little bit unclear to me.
Like,
it doesn't really matter, but
like this is one of those movies that's like, it's not good, but also it is.
It's kind of fun. And I know I was just saying, like, don't add, but I don't know. It's Celeste Holm. Like, it's fun.
Yeah.
Okay. The actor who plays the preacher, I just want to call out because he has a sad story. He died like the next year.
Yeah.
Although a very young man. He's no Carl Malden. And I'll tell you why. He's adorable.
You don't think Carl Malden is adorable?
Not in this way. Not in like a young, cute man way.
All right.
But they do have sort of the same thing going on where Aunt Polly is sort of exerting influence over the preacher of the town and like kind of telling him what to preach about and everything. And then they have this like big joyful church number where they're all kind of like breaking free from that. And like this movie needs a big joyful church number. It was great. It was great. I
want to be very clear. If anyone has ever seen the Blues Brothers, like,
it was
the tempo of the music and the choreography is the James Brown scene from Blues Brothers.
Yeah.
Like, they're identical.
Yeah.
Oh, and before we go on, I'm sorry. I know I'm interrupting. It seemed like you were about to say something serious, but while we're on this scene, we need to talk about someone who I feel gives the greatest performance by a non-speaking extra in the history of filmed cinema.
Better than the newspaper guy?
Much better than the newspaper guy. Well, he gave a terrible performance. That's the thing. Like, the newspaper guy in Anne of Green Gables was, like, notable for being terrible.
Yeah.
This guy is amazing.
This guy showed up to do his job. This guy's an actor, and he showed up to act.
I have linked to this scene in the show notes. I don't want to describe it other than while you're watching it, Reverend Gillis, maybe, did we call him Reverend Ford before?
I don't know.
We might have accidentally called him Reverend Ford. Reverend Gillis is delivering his sermon, and because his sermon is a little shocking to the crowd,
Yeah.
because he's talking about glad stuff and everything, there is a guy over his right shoulder. So
in the choir.
Yeah, in the choir on the left of the screen. You can't miss him. Every reaction he has to what Reverend Gillis is saying is better than the last. It's incredible. Like, we went back and rewatched it like 4 times because like we just started noticing him, and I was like, he's been doing stuff the whole time. We had to go back to the beginning and do it again. He's incredible. He's so into everything that the Reverend is saying. He has a reaction to every word that passes the Reverend's lips, and it's incredible.
It's incredible. Truly incredible.
Sorry, please continue.
Just on a serious note, they've taken this original source material and they have transposed it to, as we said, a different time and place. And that would be interesting in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the book about? The book is about being glad, right? The book is
Mm-hmm.
about finding joy. And the fact that in 1989, we have a TV movie directed not for nothing by a Black woman about Black joy, I think that's like subversive. Like, I think that's pretty cool. On the Disney, on the wonderful world of Disney, we have this really joyful movie it's not about segregation. It's not about dark things. It's about Black joy and Black people being joyful and happy.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just think it's really cool, and I think it's actually like sneakily subversive.
Yeah.
In a fun way.
Mm-hmm.
So that struck me as we were watching.
I mean, I feel like you can add that to the list of things that this has going for it.
Yeah.
Like, it has so many things
It has a
that's
lot of
going
things
for
going
it.
for it.
Can I put something in the con column?
Yeah.
That is holding it back?
Yes.
It's so faithful to the original Disney version. Like, I think that's actually holding it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they had gone further back to the source material and still done the things they wanted to do but not be so beholden to the Haley Mills version, I think it would have been way better.
Yeah. Well, they still have to do the thing where she like goes to the church bazaar and like falls out the window.
Oh, but she
like,
doesn't even get to go to the
she
bazaar.
doesn't even get to go because they didn't really have the like you pointed out, like, I'm not sure they have the budget for the whole bazaars because they don't really show much of it.
No.
It's a shame.
Yeah. She falls out the window going to the bazaar.
Yeah, it's really sad. And
Let's be clear.
It's just it's all, I don't know. It's good. So I did want to mention the scene kind of at the end. So like Pollyanna's fallen out the window or whatever, and she's upstairs, and they've called the doctor, and the doctor is this old white dude, and all these people are like standing around, like Polly, like Aunt Polly, and everyone like standing around really anxiously, like waiting to hear like what it is that he has to say. And this white doctor comes down the stairs, and
sorry, sweetie, old white.
This
doctor.
old white doctor, this old white dude, comes down the stairs, and in delivering the message about like Polly's state of health, says something so racist that I'm not going to repeat, but they call him out on it in the movie, like it's meant to be racist.
Yeah.
And they call him out on it in the movie, and he kind of does the thing where like he's like, well, I'm old and I don't really know, and I'm sorry, like I don't really know, the terminology that you people use these days. And like in the context of the movie, they're like, okay, well, we forgive you this once, which they shouldn't have. And just the experience of watching it with you were so horrified, and you just barked at the screen, apologize.
He never says he's
And
sorry.
He never says he's sorry.
He never says he's sorry. Like, he only says to them, well, you can understand why I said that.
And they're kind of like, you should probably go. Like,
yeah.
But just, you were so indignant on behalf of, and rightly so, on behalf of the people in that room.
Because the thing about it is like, I'm trying to be really clear about the high horse that I'm sitting on.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting here in 2023 watching this on a high horse.
Yeah.
The high horse of the present. And I'm watching him, and the judgment that I have is not about the thing that he said.
Yeah.
Because I know it was a different time, and people are shitty. Like, that's the thing. Yeah, it's a different time, but people still say shit like that.
Yeah.
My problem was that when confronted by a room full of people who he has offended with cause, like they have every right to be offended by what he said. They are not being sensitive.
Yeah.
They're being human.
Right.
He needs to fucking apologize.
Yeah, just like you were so caught up in it, you were just like staring at the screen. Your eyes got really big, and you were like, apologize.
It's ridiculous.
It was amazing.
They still do this. Oh, here, let me go back to the Disney version for a second and them being beholden to it. We didn't really talk about Dr. Shannon in this one, who is Dr. Chilton. He is now Dr. Shannon.
Yeah.
Dorian Harewood, who we just saw in An American Christmas Carol.
There you go.
He was in the Henry Winkler one.
Oh, yeah.
He's a very handsome man. And he plays the love interest. But they still do the same thing that the Disney version does, which is I don't think it's as overt as the Haley Mills version, but they definitely are doing the thing where it's like, well, what Aunt Polly needs is the right man to tell her what to do.
Sure.
And to tell her how to be.
But a handsome man.
Well, he's very handsome.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. He's very handsome, but she's very beautiful. He is not as handsome as she is beautiful.
This is true.
But it's
who could be?
But
who
it's still
could be?
it still is falling back on that thing of she just needs the right man to tell her what to do.
Sure.
And she needs to listen to a man.
Yeah.
That's what she needs. She's listening to herself a little too much. She needs to listen to a man.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer that we do get we get some fun musical numbers. I guess I'm just going back to the musical numbers. The musical numbers are fun and weird, and mostly, I would say, like 90% of the musical numbers are kind of out of place.
Fun and weird, I think, is a good summary. It is very Blues Brothers, actually.
Yeah.
Some of them. Well, I think the musical style is similar.
Right.
Yeah.
I also, let me say this now, just in case anyone was mad at me for something I said before. What I said something before that might have been very ignorant, that the church dance number in this one is the same as the one from the Blues Brothers. That also might have been referencing something that I am
who can say?
ignorant of. So if that is the case, I just want you to know I'm open to that, and please tell me.
Is that like me yelling at Emerson Radio when they said that the thing from 1776 reminded them of Hamilton?
I mean, yes, someone out there might be yelling at me right now
Right.
for saying something like
Right,
that.
right.
Anyway, this is... was it good?
Yeah, I think it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
enjoyed watching it. Like, what
I enjoyed it
other
too.
standard can you hold anything to?
Yeah, I guess so.
All right. Well, I mean, listen, we'll come back to the quadrants
Yeah.
at the end.
And Keisha Knight Pulliam
She's so cute.
is really, really cute. Oh, and Brandon Quinton Adams as Jimmy Bean.
Oh, yeah.
Who was in like The Mighty Ducks and all manner and The Sandlot.
A
and
recognizable child
all
actor.
manner of other things from our childhood.
Right.
If you're of a certain generation.
A certain one.
Yeah, like
An old millennial.
yeah, they are really good and cute. And Keisha Knight Pulliam is great.
She's really
Every
good.
scene she has with Celeste Holm is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the two of them have such good chemistry. There's the great scene before she meets Miss Snow where she's talking to Jimmy Bean because she says she's going to go. Wait, is she talking to Jimmy Bean or is she talking to Nancy?
I do not know.
As the actress was Vanessa Bell Calloway as Nancy. She's talking to someone about Miss Snow, and she just says, "Is she mean?" And the response is, "She's white." I think
that's Jimmy
it's
Bean.
Jimmy Bean.
Yeah, that was pretty funny.
Yeah, like it's well written too. Like
Yeah.
the script is good, and it deals with that stuff in a good and honest way.
Yes,
like that.
agreed.
Like it is a little more honest than I think I would have expected for
A Disney movie.
Disney Family TV in 1989.
Yeah,
but,
that's right.
But
Well, it's Debbie Allen. So.
good that it exists,
Yeah.
and Debbie Allen is a fucking powerhouse.
It's just national treasure.
Yeah. Do you want to move on to the last one?
Let's do it.
How delightful that our earlier supposition was proved correct.
Didn't need to be American.
Yeah, doesn't need to at all.
Mm-mm.
Like, and we knew this one was coming.
Yep.
We knew that there was a 2004 British TV movie, but I didn't know that it was not set in America.
Mhm.
Had no idea. And the movie starts, and we hear people talking,
Go, huh?
and they're all, they're British.
Are they? I mean, yeah,
Like, actually British. Interesting.
fascinating.
And we meet more and more characters, and they all are British, and the town they're in. This is it officially Beldingsville?
It's
in
Beldingsville, and also it can only be reached by boat.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little British town.
Yep.
It just was so validating.
Yeah.
Like, did you feel that way too?
Yeah, because we had been talking about you could set this anywhere, and then the last two we watched were set in
Mhm.
places different from the original text.
Yeah. Directed by Sarah Harding, written by Simon Nye. It starred Georgina Terry as Pollyanna,
Mhm.
a little British Pollyanna.
Yep.
Like a little British kid playing Pollyanna, but allowed to be British.
Britishly.
Yeah,
Yes.
because we've had more. I think we've had as many British Pollyannas as we haven't.
That's
at
about
this
right.
point.
Yeah.
And they've handled. Here are the different ways it's handled. How did they handle it with Haley Mills?
Ignored it.
Okay. How did they handle it with Elizabeth Archer in 1973?
Badly.
Bad, right? How did they handle it with Georgina Terry in 2004?
Fine.
Fine. It's British. She's British.
Yeah.
And adorable.
Mhm.
And a good actor.
Yes.
She's so good.
She's very good.
I had said early on, you had made a comment about there being like a perfect casting for Aunt Polly.
Yeah.
And I had said, oh, yeah. And then you said Felicia Rashad. I was like, oh, she's good too.
Yeah.
I was thinking of Amanda Burton
Ah.
as Aunt Polly in this one. I think she is like, this is the Aunt Polly from the book.
Right.
Even though British.
Yes.
But like, if I'm thinking of like who I pictured
You
in
think
the
Felicia
book.
Rashad is like too pretty?
Like almost maybe.
Yeah.
But like for me, it's like between her and Amanda Burton.
Sure.
So this has a very good cast. This episode, I would like to welcome up to the dais a new friend of the pod.
This is always exciting.
Your friend and mine, Pam Ferris.
Yay!
Is a friend of the pod.
Yay! Come accept your award. We don't have one.
She was in Matilda, 1996,
Mhm.
Children of Men, 2006, Jane Eyre, 2006.
Yep.
And she was back in Cluedo in 1992.
There it is.
She played I believe she was Mrs. White in one of them. So she plays Mrs. Snow and
And
Mrs. White,
There it is.
which is great. But she is our Mrs. Snow for this one.
This
And
is
she
gonna
is,
keep
as
happening.
she always is, delightful.
This is going to keep happening more and more.
Well, yeah, I mean, we keep doing new episodes.
We watched something the other day that I think it had 2 new friends of the pod.
Oh, it's no, we're doing Hamlet, and there are going to be so many new inductees.
Yeah, it's
like,
exciting.
We might need to start like having
No,
rankings
no,
for
no,
friend of the
no,
pod.
because I was mad when we went for rankings like friend of the pod plus, like when you get to 10 or something like that.
Yeah, something
That
like
would
that.
be cool. Yeah. Are we keeping this list? Like, are we writing this down anywhere?
I'm keeping track.
Okay.
I'm starting to keep track. I think the thing I'm finding out, so there is one person in particular that we'll talk about more when we talk about Hamlet,
Yeah.
who was a friend of the pod a while ago that we never actually acknowledged.
Yeah.
So Hamlet is like his 7th appearance on the show, but we weren't really keeping track at that time.
Sure.
So yes, we have one new friend of the pod.
Yeah.
It is Pam Ferris. Not only is she a friend of the pod, she's also very good in this as Mrs. Snow.
Yeah.
She's great because Pam Ferris is always great.
I just want to say Charlton Heston, enemy of the pod.
Always.
Mhm.
What would you like to say about this one? Because I could go on about people that I liked in it, but what would you like to talk about with this one?
I think as we started watching this, we became cautiously optimistic
Mhm.
because the note that I wrote down is, well, we've been wrong before, but we were thinking it was good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're being like, wow, is this going to be like, are we going to end on a high? Like, is this going to be the best one? I think it went off the rails a little bit.
You think so?
What do you think?
So my last note, I think, let me just get to the end here.
Yeah.
It doesn't end super strong.
Yeah.
It is my favorite one.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think it's the best one.
I think the stuff about the car was just over the top. Like the foreshadowing of like Tim. First of all, the Nancy and Tim subplot was like not
Adorable.
even it was adorable, but like I don't.
Perfect.
Okay.
Wonderful. They're so cute.
They're very cute, but it was a lot of Nancy and Tim and a little less Pollyanna. But the whole thing about Tim being interested in cars, and at the beginning he wants to buy a car, and then he does buy a car, and then they go for a ride in the car, and he's talking about the car, and then she gets hit by a car, and then they're mad about the car, and then he sells the car. Like
Well,
the
Nancy
car
literally
stuff,
says to him, because he proposes to Nancy in this one.
Yes.
Because he's in love with her.
correct.
And she says to him, like, I just can't look at you. When I look at you, all I can think of is the car that hurt our poor Pollyanna.
Yes.
And like, I don't mind that.
I think the foreshadowing with the car,
Mhm.
even though I do appreciate that we're back to her getting hit by a car and not falling out of a tree, I think the foreshadowing with the car was a little bit over the top. I will say there was an actor in this who's not yet friend of the pod,
Mm-hmm.
but who was delightful to see, and that was David Bamber.
Yeah. Just two appearances.
Yeah, but maybe 2 appearances in anything ever, because I don't know that I've ever seen him in anything else.
I'm sure he was in the bill.
Yeah, well, I wrote down, like, you said to me, is it weird to see him because you think of he's so inextricably linked with Mr. Collins. And I was like, you got to keep working. You can't just be in one BBC miniseries and then stop. Like, these people are working actors.
But he does play Reverend Ford in this one, so we get to see him as a man of the cloth.
Well, you had some headcanon that, like, this is him in later life. Like,
no, it was like one of his descendants, I think.
Yeah, right.
That was my, I think that was my headcanon.
That's great. That's great.
But he's very good. It was definitely, this is the thing that's unfair, because he was doing a really good job at acting.
Yeah.
But in my head, because I only really know him from the one thing, just because of my limited experience with him as an actor, even though he has been in many things. Like, let's be clear, he's been in many things.
Yeah.
Just the Venn diagram of things he's in and things I've seen only has a very, very small amount of crossover.
Yeah.
It is unfair for me to have felt like I couldn't connect to him in this one that much because I only see him as Mr. Collins.
Right.
But that is kind of what happened.
Yeah.
But that's not a valid criticism.
Well, and also he's playing like a priest or a reverend or whatever.
He's
a
Reverend
deacon,
Ford.
Yeah.
He's a reverend in this.
All right.
They did an interesting thing with his part, though, that I appreciated, because they don't show the scene of Pollyanna talking to him about the rejoicing text.
Right.
It's not there. But later in the production, it's after Pollyanna has her accident and she's upstairs, and they have this really, I thought, really well put together montage where different people are coming to visit the house.
Yes, I did like that.
And are telling Aunt Polly about the things that Pollyanna has done.
Right.
And David Bamber, who is a very good actor, delivers, I think, a very well-written monologue about the interaction he had with Pollyanna.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel to me like it was just, oh, we've got to get this in here somehow. It felt to me, it just went just beyond that into, this is a good actor delivering a good monologue.
I hear what you're saying. I do remember having a reaction to it, like, why are we just hearing about this now? Like, because that's a good scene between the two of them. Why did we have to have that left out? Because he's not in it very much at all.
No.
Like, I don't know. I'm not saying it wasn't good. I'm saying that particular thing I do remember thinking, I don't know that I care for this. Why are we just hearing about it? This is sort of a show not tell.
Yeah.
Tell not show kind
of
thing.
my big note for that whole section was, like, on the one hand, I'm frustrated that they're taking all these scenes and reducing them to a montage of exposition. But on the other hand, they're keeping it all. It is there. And a montage is a thing. Like, exposition is annoying when it's just exposition, but a montage is a way to tell a story.
Yeah.
And it is done as an interesting montage. And the thing that it's doing, I thought, is that it was keeping the focus on Aunt Polly.
Yeah.
Because I think Aunt Polly is the main character of the story. She's the one with the biggest arc.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And the focus was not on him or any of the other characters telling their story. The focus is on Aunt Polly's reaction to them telling the story.
Yeah.
That, like...
Yeah, no, I hear you. I hear everything you're saying.
That was my interpretation at the moment.
That's fine.
That's just how I feel about it.
It's just how I feel.
It's not a fact. This is just how I felt about it. I liked that.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Nancy and Tim a little bit more?
Sure.
Okay, so Nancy is Kate Ashfield, who was Liz in Shaun of the Dead.
There it is.
And I was so delighted. It was the same year. I was so delighted to see her in this. She's great. And I thought, again, this is the kind of thing where, like, they are removing this from the original context of the book, but I thought she was Nancy.
Yeah.
Like, she absolutely was. And they did the thing with her that we had seen it before, but I don't think any of them did it as well. The mistaken thinking that she gets Pollyanna into in terms of what was going on between Pendleton and Aunt Polly.
Yeah.
Like, the way she sold those scenes, I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, I loved her in those scenes.
Yeah.
But then you've got Tim, who's played by Tom Ellis, who some people might know as Lucifer from the show from 2016 to 2021. From the show Lucifer. Lucifer, he literally Lucifer Morningstar himself, who is two things: gigantic and also adorable.
Yeah, very cute.
Tim is so cute in this one, and they're so cute together. And they do the thing where, like, he's super into Nancy and tries, like, he courts her. And if she wasn't into it, it would be creepy, but she is into it and she does like him, so it's adorable. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. I loved it.
It's adorable.
Can I talk about I feel like, are you done with your notes?
I think I'm done with my notes, so you just keep going.
I got so much more. I want to talk about more about the writing that I really liked.
Okay.
This kind of goes back to the car stuff that you were talking about before, where, yes, they do make a big point of calling out the presence of cars a lot.
A lot.
It is a lot of foreshadowing.
A lot.
I still am glad. I found it refreshing that the writer decided to make a goddamn decision.
Mhm.
They decided to make a decision about what they were writing, and they decided to use a well-worn and a tried and true method of writing called foreshadowing. And I'd rather
They used it a lot.
I'd rather have something like that than have nothing.
Sure.
Which we've had some versions that just decide to do nothing
Mhm.
and don't really do anything that makes the story entertaining. At least this one did stuff. Another example of this that I loved was that clearly whoever wrote this read the book, and there is a small thing in it. We talked about it before with the flies getting in.
Yep.
Where Aunt Polly in the book is clearly a little sensitive to flies in the house.
Yeah.
And doesn't want Pollyanna or Nancy to open the windows of Pollyanna's room because she doesn't want the flies flying in.
Yep.
It's never really mentioned before, and it's never really mentioned after.
Yeah.
It's just one of the vignettes of Pollyanna's time with Aunt Polly.
Yeah.
Clearly, whoever was writing this said, that's a character. That's a character trait that I'm gonna capitalize on. So the way this whole thing starts, like, not only does it start with Aunt Polly, which I think is the right thing to do because Aunt Polly is the main character, it's dead flies.
Yep.
So it's Nancy cleaning the house and Aunt Polly in different rooms just yelling out, "Dead fly! Dead fly!" And it does so much to tell us who the character is, what her relationship is with the other characters. We see Nancy's reaction to her. Like, it tells us so much about Aunt Polly. If you'd never read the book and you'd never seen any other version, I feel like this is the best defined Aunt Polly that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
If we want to talk about a well-defined character in terms of character traits and not just physical beauty, in which case she's the second best defined Aunt Polly that we've seen so far.
Yeah. Correct.
And they tie it all together because one of the things when Tim really wants to get a car, he goes to Aunt Polly and says, like, I want to buy us a car. Can we get a car? And she's like, we don't need a car. A horse and a carriage is fine. And he says, there's less flies in the car because it's moving too fast. And she goes, get us a car.
Yeah.
Like, that's a decision. I
Yep.
think that is I like it. It's a
Yeah.
really good decision. This one had the very best explanation for the Glad game that
Mhm.
any of them did.
Yeah.
When Polly is explaining, because every single one has to have Pollyanna explaining to Nancy or someone else where the Glad game came from. And usually they go on way too long. They're either too long or too short.
Yeah.
It's a real Goldilocks situation.
Sure.
This one, just right.
He just did a chef's kiss.
Just right. Oh, it's perfect. It's exactly the right length. All the words that are chosen, the length of the sentences, everything about her description of the Glad game is the best one that we've had so far.
Uh-huh.
It's worth it just for that scene.
Yep.
It's really, really good. This is the thing that happens to me whenever we do these. Like, Pollyanna doesn't mean much to me, and it's not like Pollyanna is one of my favorite books, but, like, the Glad game is the thing about the book that everyone responds to.
Right.
And I responded to it.
Yeah, of
So I
course.
want it to be shown in a way that's compelling on screen.
Yeah.
Here's another thing. Aunt Polly literally puts her hand to her throat.
Yes, she
Throughout
does
the
thing.
movie.
She does. She does exactly the gesture that you responded to
The
in the
gesture to show
You're right. No,
I have
you're
lost
right.
control of my
book.
life.
She does it when she walks in on, like, Tim and Nancy. Like, I don't know if they were kissing, but they were, like,
Canoodling.
and she sort of, like, comes around. They're outside, and she
Mhm.
sort of, like, comes around the corner, sees them, does the thing, and then, like, just retreats back into the bushes or wherever she came from.
Mm-hmm.
She does do that.
That's all I've got about
Yeah.
this one. I think it's the best one.
Okay.
That's
fine.
it was a delight. It was a delight and validating and great.
Do you want to do some quadrants?
Yeah, let's do some quadrants.
Let's do it.
Do you feel good that we did Pollyanna?
I feel great. Yeah, I feel like this was really successful. And I'm glad that, as always, I'm glad to get you to read classic works of literature that I would very much doubt many other 40-year-old American men have read.
That's probably fair.
Yeah.
1920, do you think they cared about the source material?
Absolutely not.
You don't think so?
No.
Literally just came out 7 years before. It was a big hit,
No.
a big popular book.
They don't give a shit.
Okay. I kind of think they did.
All right, fine. They did.
Was it successful?
No, not really.
I don't think so. Like, it was successful for what it was trying to be, but I would not say it's a successful adaptation
Yeah.
of the book Pollyanna. 1960, Disney, Pollyanna. Do you think they cared about the source material?
I do.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, I think they do. I think they did.
Do you think it was successful?
Yes.
Went pretty far afield
Yeah.
of what the book was telling us, but I think it's a classic
A
for
classic,
a reason,
classic.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Classic.
1973 miniseries. Do you think they cared about the source material?
I do not know.
No. Do you think they were successful?
No, I don't.
This is really this is a bummer of an unsuccessful miniseries.
Yeah.
1986 anime series. Do you think they cared about the source material?
No.
I feel like
it's hard to say. I wouldn't like to say.
I feel like someone cared very deeply, but maybe the way they decided to express how much they cared, I would say was wrong-headed.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a very lovingly crafted tribute to things that don't happen in the book.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
are referred to.
Sure.
So someone clearly read the book to say like, hey, she talks about all these things. We're going to show all of them.
Yeah.
And I feel like that demonstrates a care and
Sure.
a reverence of the book.
I'm with you. I think it's not fair for us to say because we didn't watch the whole thing.
Whether
I think
whether they cared or whether it's successful.
I would like to recuse myself for either. I think we should recuse ourselves from judgment because we did not watch the whole thing.
I'm not going to recuse myself from the first question because I believe saying that they cared is a nice thing.
Fair enough.
And I feel good saying that.
Okay.
Like you, I also do not feel confident in being able to say whether it was successful or not as we quit and because we were done and we had no patience for it.
We were just in that headspace.
1989's Polly. Do you think they cared about the source material?
I think they cared about the Disney movie.
So no.
So no.
Okay. Was it successful?
Yes.
Yes. 2004's TV movie. Do you think they cared about the source material?
I think someone must have.
Yeah. Was it successful?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Totally.
Hey, this was great. We did Pollyanna.
We did it.
Hey, while I'm getting everything queued up, what's the next orphan that we're gonna handle?
I think it's Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. Maybe 2024.
Is she an orphan too?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh no, she's not an orphan. Her father is dead, but she has a mother.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But it counts. We're done with orphans. We have to do half orphans now.
We'll figure it out.
All right.
Well, this has been Adapter Parish. If you'd like to find us online, we're on Instagram and Facebook at AdaptCast. We're on Mastodon at adaptcast@mastodon.social. You can join our Adapter Parish fans group on Facebook. You can find and follow me on Letterboxd, and you can always send an email to adapterparishcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, there are a number of great ways that you can do it. First, tell a friend. Second, a rating and review on your podcast platform of choice would be greatly appreciated. Third, we are on Patreon. This show will always be free, but if you become a patron, you can get access to Adapter Parish Plus, our bonus show that releases between episodes of this show, and our patron-only Slack community. You can find the details at patreon.com/adaptcast. Finally, if you go to bookshop.org/shop/adaptcast, we've created a storefront where you can purchase all of the books we've covered on the show. Part of every purchase will support us and a local bookstore of your choice.
I am glad
Yes.
that we got to record this together because it was fun.
That's not how you play the game. This is objectively a good thing.
Ah.
Why are you glad we watched the 1973 version?
Because it was fun to make fun of.
Okay, that's kind of mean. Why are you?
What do
that's
you
not
want
how,
from me?
That's not how you play
What do
the
you
glad
want from
game.
me?
No, I'm so glad we watched the 1973 version because it just made us enjoy the ones we enjoyed so much more.
That's good. That's better.
I think I know how to play this game.
Bye, everyone.
Actually, not bye. It's not goodbye.
What is it?
Because I have one more thing I need to do.
Okay.
I saved this for the end. I am a child, and I'm so sorry for what I have prepared here. I have 12 selections from the book Pollyanna by Eleanor H. Porter. Selection number 1. Poor little soul, a pretty place this is to put a homesick, lonesome child into. She finished going out and closing the door with a bang. Oh, she ejaculated, biting her lip. Selection number 2. Pollyanna, ejaculated her aunt, turning sharply about as she reached the head of the stairs. Number 3. Well, upon my soul, ejaculated Miss Polly half aloud. What a most extraordinary child. Then she frowned. She's glad I punished her, and I mustn't feel bad one bit, and she's going to love to live with me? Well, upon my soul, ejaculated Miss Polly again as she took up her book. 4. Pollyanna, hand those things to me at once and come in here. Of all the extraordinary children, she ejaculated a little later, as with Pollyanna by her side and the lantern in her hand, she turned back into the attic. Next, certainly as those first July days passed, Miss Polly found occasion many times to ejaculate. What an extraordinary child. Well, you're so unimpressed right now. Well, I never. Now, what does she mean by that? Ejaculated Mrs. Snow, staring after her visitor. This is, I think, my favorite one. Well, of all the, ejaculated the man with an oddly impotent gesture. Well, of all but he ejaculated again as he turned and strode on as before. Well, really, she ejaculated then in not quite an agreeable tone of voice. The doctor turned with a quick start. Your aunt? He ejaculated. Sorry, your aunt? He ejaculated. And so I'm glad you'd rather have Jimmy Bean. Now I know you'll take him. Take who? Jimmy Bean. He's the child's presence, you know, and he'll be so glad to be it. I had to tell him last week that even my lady's aide out west wouldn't take him, and he was so disappointed. But now, when he hears of this, he'll be so glad. Will he? Well, I won't, ejaculated the man decisively.
Are you proud of yourself?
Super proud of myself. This is the proudest I've ever been of the content we've created for this show.
I'm so glad.
I'm just saying things have changed in 100 years. Bye, everybody.
Bye.